Hello, dear friend, and welcome to this quiet corner of history. Tonight, we set aside the noise of the present and wander gently into the stories of the past. Whether you're curled up beneath the blankets, resting after a long day, or simply seeking calm company for your evening, I'm grateful you've chosen to be here. If you'd like, share in the comments where in the world you're listening from. I always love seeing how far this community stretches across time zones and continents. And if these soothing journeys through history bring you comfort, consider subscribing so we can meet again. For now, let's loosen the weight of the modern world and step softly into the echoes of yesterday. Close your eyes and let yourself drift back through the mists of time, to a world where the line between dream and reality was as thin as morning fog over the Aegean Sea. Tonight, we journey together into the heart of ancient Egypt, where the golden sand holds secrets older than memory itself, and where pharaohs once walked as living gods beneath the eternal gaze of the sun. Here, along the banks of the mighty Nile, civilization bloomed like lotus flowers in the dawn light, creating a story so magnificent that even after thousands of years, it continues to whisper its mysteries to those who dare to listen. Picture, if you will, the gentle curve of the Nile River as it winds its way through the desert like a serpent of life, carrying with it the rich black silt that would transform barren sand into fertile paradise. This is where our story begins, in that magical moment when the scattered tribes of the river valley first looked up at the stars and dreamed of eternity. They could not have known then that they were laying the foundation for one of the most enduring civilizations in human history, a kingdom that would spend 3 millennia and produce rulers whose names would echo through the ages like incantations of power and glory. The ancient Egyptians believed that before the first pharaoh ever set foot upon the throne, their land was ruled by the gods themselves. In those primordial times, Ra, the sun god, walked the earth in human form, his golden skin radiating the warmth that brought life to the valley. Beside him ruled Ta, the creator god who spoke the world into existence, and Thoth, the wise ibis-headed deity who gave humanity the gift of writing. These divine rulers, the Egyptians told their children, established the sacred order of Ma'at, the cosmic balance that would guide every pharaoh who came after them. But even gods, it seemed, grew weary of earthly rule. As Ra aged, his divine essence began to return to the heavens, and the time came to choose mortal successors who could carry forward the sacred responsibility of maintaining harmony between the earthly realm and the cosmic order above. It was then that the first true pharaoh emerged from the convergence of myth and history, a figure whose very name has become synonymous with the unification of ancient Egypt. Narmer, though some know him as Menes, stands at the threshold between legend and recorded history like a colossus casting shadows across the millennia. Around 3100 BCE, when the world was still young and the Great Pyramids were nothing more than distant dreams in the mind of eternity, this remarkable ruler accomplished something that would reshape the ancient world forever. He united the two lands of Egypt, Upper Egypt in the south with its capital at Hierakonpolis, and Lower Egypt in the north centered around Memphis, into a single, powerful kingdom that would endure for over 3,000 years. The story of this unification reads like an epic poem carved in stone. For generations, the two kingdoms had existed in uneasy tension, sometimes trading peacefully, sometimes clashing in battles that sent ripples across the ancient world. Upper Egypt, with its harsh desert landscape and fierce warrior culture, produced rulers who knew the value of strength and determination. Lower Egypt, blessed with the fertile delta where the Nile spread its fingers into the Mediterranean, had developed sophisticated systems of agriculture and trade that brought wealth beyond measure. When Narmer gazed out from his palace in the south, he saw not two separate lands but a single nation waiting to be born. The vision that drove him was both political and spiritual. He understood that Egypt's true strength lay not in division but in unity, not in the rivalry between north and south but in their complementary gifts joined together like the two sides of a perfect whole. The hieroglyphic scenes that celebrate his victory show him wearing both the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, symbolic of a unity that transcended mere military conquest to become a sacred joining of cosmic opposites. Imagine the moment when Narmer's forces swept northward along the Nile, not as mere conquerors but as agents of divine destiny. The battles were fierce, for the northerners were proud and wealthy, with armies equipped with bronze weapons and strategic positions that had protected them for centuries. But something more than military might drove the forces of unification forward. The ancient texts speak of omens and portents, of gods appearing in dreams to whisper strategies, of the Nile itself seeming to bless the campaign by rising in perfect floods that fed the advancing armies while hampering their enemies. The final battle, fought somewhere in the Delta region where the Nile fans out into the Mediterranean, marked not just the end of a war but the birth of a civilization. When Narmer placed the red crown of Lower Egypt upon his head alongside the white crown of his homeland, he became something unprecedented in human history, a god-king whose authority stretched from the cataracts in the south to the shores of the Great Green Sea in the north, ruling over a kingdom that was both earthly domain and sacred cosmos. The capital he established at Memphis, at the strategic junction where Upper and Lower Egypt met, became more than just a seat of government. It was a living symbol of unity, a place where the cultural treasures of both kingdoms could blend and flourish. Here, the sophisticated irrigation techniques of the north merged with the spiritual traditions of the south. The practical administrative skills that had made the Delta prosperous were applied to the warrior code that had forged the southern kingdoms. Most importantly, here the concept of divine kingship took root and began to grow into the magnificent flowering we know as pharaonic civilization. But Narmer was more than just a conqueror or even a great king. He was a visionary who understood that lasting unity required more than military force. It demanded a new way of thinking about kingship itself. Under his rule, the pharaoh became not merely a human ruler but a living bridge between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. This concept, revolutionary in its time, would become the foundation stone upon which all of Egyptian civilization would be built. The early dynasties that followed Narmer's unification were like the first tentative notes of a symphony that would eventually crescendo into the magnificent music of the Pyramid Age. Each pharaoh who succeeded to the throne added his own voice to this growing chorus of divine kingship, establishing traditions and institutions that would endure for millennia. These were the rulers of what we now call the early dynastic period, a time of experimentation and establishment when the fundamental structures of Egyptian civilization were being lovingly crafted like precious jewels in the workshop of history. Consider Horah, who may have been Narmer's immediate successor, though the precise relationships between these early rulers remain shrouded in the mists of time like shadows dancing at the edge of vision. The name Horah means fighting hawk, and indeed, his reign was marked by the fierce energy of a predator establishing its territory. Under his rule, the administrative machinery of unified Egypt began to take shape with remarkable sophistication. Scribes trained in the sacred art of hieroglyphic writing fanned out across the kingdom, carrying royal decrees and recording the tribute that flowed like golden rivers toward the capital at Memphis. The tombs of these early pharaohs, discovered by archaeologists in the royal cemetery at Abydos, tell stories that make the imagination soar with wonder. These were not the massive pyramid complexes that would come later, but they possessed their own austere majesty. Cut into the desert floor like wounds in the earth that had healed into sanctuaries, these burial chambers were surrounded by the graves of hundreds of servants and officials who chose to accompany their divine king into the afterlife. The practice speaks to a devotion so complete, a belief in the pharaoh's divinity so absolute, that death itself seemed preferable to separation from their god-king's presence. Jur, whose name means strong, ruled for what may have been over 40 years, a reign so long that it allowed Egyptian civilization to sink its roots deep into the fertile soil of the Nile Valley. During his time on the throne, the great annual festival of Sed was established, a ritual renewal of the pharaoh's power that would become one of the most important ceremonies in ancient Egypt. Picture, if you will, the elderly jur running a ritual race around specially constructed markers, symbolically proving his continued fitness to rule while the assembled nobles and priests chanted prayers for his rejuvenation. This wasn't merely a political ceremony but a magical working, a communion with the divine forces that sustained both the pharaoh and the land he ruled. The queen mothers and royal wives of this early period deserve their own songs of praise, for they too played crucial roles in establishing the traditions that would guide Egyptian royalty for centuries to come. Nephthotep, whose name links her to the ancient goddess of war and weaving, demonstrates how royal women were not merely decorative consorts but active participants in the sacred drama of divine kingship. The titles they bore, she who sees Horus and Seth, mother of the king's children, priestess of Neith, reveal the complex spiritual and political roles they played in maintaining the cosmic order. As we drift further into this ancient world, the figure of Jet emerges from the shadows of the past like a star becoming visible in the darkening sky. Known as the Snake King from the hieroglyph of his name, Jet ruled during a period when Egyptian art and architecture began to reach toward the heights they would achieve in later dynasties. His tomb at Abydos was remarkable for its time, featuring not only the usual burial chamber but also subsidiary rooms filled with grave goods of extraordinary beauty and sophistication. Among these treasures were ivory labels inscribed with some of the earliest known hieroglyphic texts, precious documents that offer tantalizing glimpses into the daily life of the royal court. These small masterpieces describe festivals and ceremonies, military campaigns, and administrative appointments, the rhythms of a society that was already remarkably complex and organized. Reading them today is like overhearing whispered conversations from a world that vanished 4.5 millennia ago, yet whose echoes still resonate in the monuments and artifacts they left behind. Queen Den, whose reign marked a high point of early dynastic culture, deserves special recognition as one of the most accomplished rulers of this formative period. Her name, which means, "he who brings water," may seem unusual for a female pharaoh, but it perfectly captures the life-giving nature of her rule. During her reign, the annual Nile flood was particularly beneficial, allowing agriculture to flourish and trade to expand to distant lands. Caravans bearing Egyptian goods reached as far as the Levant and Nubia, while foreign merchants brought cedar wood, lapis lazuli, and exotic animals to the Egyptian court. The artistic achievements of Den's reign were particularly noteworthy. The royal workshops produced jewelry of breathtaking beauty, carved ivory objects that seemed to glow with inner light, and stone vessels shaped with such precision that they appear to have been formed by divine hands rather than human tools. The famous ivory label showing Den smiting an enemy demonstrates not only the artistic sophistication of the period but also the continuity of pharaonic iconography that would persist throughout Egyptian history. This image, the pharaoh as divine warrior protecting Egypt from chaos, would be repeated countless times over the next 3 millennia, each iteration a renewal of the cosmic battle between order and disorder. But perhaps the most significant development during Den's reign was the elaboration of the burial customs that would eventually culminate in the magnificent pyramid complexes of the Old Kingdom. Her tomb at Abydos featured a granite burial chamber, the first known use of this eternally durable stone in royal construction. The symbolism was profound and deliberate. Granite, harder than bronze, resistant to time and weather, represented the pharaoh's eternal nature, the divine essence that would survive the dissolution of the mortal body to join the imperishable stars in the sky. The priests who served these early pharaohs were developing the theological concepts that would define Egyptian religion for millennia. The idea that the pharaoh was the earthly embodiment of Horus, the falcon god who conquered his enemies and brought order to chaos, was gradually being elaborated into a comprehensive doctrine of divine kingship. But this wasn't merely an abstract theological concept, it had profound practical implications for how Egyptian society organized itself and how individuals understood their place in the cosmic order. Every Egyptian, from the humblest farmer to the most exalted noble, was connected to the pharaoh through a vast web of relationships and obligations that mirrored the structure of the universe itself. Just as the sun god Ra traveled across the sky each day, maintaining the cosmic order through his passage, so the pharaoh traveled throughout his kingdom, ensuring that Ma'at, truth, justice, and cosmic balance prevailed in every province and every village. This wasn't simply political administration but a sacred duty, a divine mission that made the pharaoh responsible not only for his subjects' material welfare but for their spiritual well-being and the very stability of the cosmos. As we continue our gentle journey through time, we encounter Anajib, a pharaoh whose reign demonstrates both the achievements and the challenges of early Egyptian kingship. His name, meaning, safe is his heart, suggests a ruler who brought stability to the throne, yet the archaeological evidence hints at political difficulties that may have threatened the unity so carefully constructed by his predecessors. Some scholars interpret certain inscriptions as evidence of civil conflict, perhaps between different factions at court or between the traditional power centers of North and South. If such troubles did occur during Anajib's reign, they would have been understood not merely as political crises but as manifestations of cosmic disorder, threats to the divine harmony that the pharaoh was sworn to maintain. The resolution of such conflicts required not only political skill but also spiritual power, the ability to perform the rituals and ceremonies that would restore Ma'at to the kingdom and realign the earthly realm with the divine order of the universe. The tomb of Anajib reveals another fascinating development in early pharaonic culture, the increasing emphasis on the pharaoh's role as high priest of all the gods. Religious objects found in his burial chamber include ceremonial maces and crowns that were used in temple rituals, emphasizing that the pharaoh's divine authority extended to every aspect of religious life throughout the kingdom. This wasn't merely ceremonial. The pharaoh's participation in religious festivals and temple rituals was believed to be essential for maintaining the fertility of the land, the regularity of the Nile flood, and the protection of Egypt from foreign enemies and natural disasters. Semerkhet, whose name means thoughtful friend, ruled during what appears to have been a period of consolidation and reflection. The monuments of his reign show a marked emphasis on traditional artistic forms and religious ceremonies, suggesting a ruler who understood the importance of continuity in maintaining the sacred nature of pharaonic authority. His reign may have been relatively brief, but it played a crucial role in preserving and transmitting the accumulated wisdom of the early dynasties to their successors. The artisans who worked during Semerkhet's reign produced some of the finest examples of early Egyptian craftsmanship that have survived to the present day. Stone vessels carved from exotic materials like porphyry and breccia demonstrate technical skills that would not be out of place in the workshops of much later periods. These objects were not merely decorative but held deep symbolic significance, representing the pharaoh's ability to transform raw materials into objects of beauty and meaning, just as he transformed the chaos of competing tribes into the ordered harmony of unified Egypt. Qaa, the last pharaoh of the First Dynasty, ruled during a time of tremendous transition when the foundations laid by his predecessors were about to support the magnificent flowering of Egyptian civilization that would characterize the Old Kingdom. His name, possibly meaning, "the arm is raised," suggests a ruler who maintained the warrior traditions of his ancestors while preparing the way for the cultural achievements that were to come. During Qaa's reign, the practice of writing continued to develop and spread throughout Egyptian society. Administrative documents from this period show increasing sophistication in record-keeping and governmental organization. The hieroglyphic system, which had begun as simple pictographs, was evolving into the complex writing system that could express abstract concepts and poetic imagery with equal facility. This development was crucial for the maintenance of pharaonic authority, as it allowed royal decrees and religious texts to be preserved and transmitted across vast distances and long periods of time. The transition from the First to the Second Dynasty marks one of the most mysterious periods in ancient Egyptian history, shrouded in uncertainty and conflicting evidence that has puzzled historians for generations. The traditional king lists, carved in stone by later pharaohs who sought to honor their ancestors, show a clear succession from Qaa to Hotep Sekhemwi, the first pharaoh of the Second Dynasty. Yet archaeological evidence suggests that this transition may have been more complex and turbulent than the official records indicate. Hotep-Sekhemwy, whose name means peaceful in powers, may have chosen this title specifically to emphasize his role as a unifier and peacemaker after a period of internal conflict. His reign appears to have been marked by efforts to restore and strengthen the administrative and religious institutions that had developed during the First Dynasty. New temples were built or renovated, trade relationships with foreign lands were re-established, and the royal court once again became a center of artistic and intellectual achievement. The religious innovations of the Second Dynasty would have profound implications for the development of pharaonic ideology. It was during this period that the complex mythology surrounding the pharaoh's relationship to the gods Horus and Seth was fully elaborated. According to this theology, every pharaoh was the earthly embodiment of Horus, the falcon god who represented order and rightful authority. But upon death, the pharaoh became Osiris, the god of the underworld and resurrection, while his successor took on the role of Horus in an eternal cycle of death and renewal that mirrored the daily journey of the sun across the sky. Ranab, the second pharaoh of the dynasty, whose name means Ra is the Lord, represents a crucial development in Egyptian religious thought. His choice to incorporate the name of Ra, the sun god, into his royal titulature reflects the growing importance of solar theology and pharaonic ideology. This wasn't merely a change in religious fashion but a fundamental shift in how Egyptians understood the nature of divine kingship. The pharaoh was no longer just the earthly representative of the gods but was identified with Ra himself, the supreme creator deity whose daily journey across the heavens maintained the cosmic order. This solar theology would reach its full flowering during the Old Kingdom, when the Great Pyramid complexes would be designed as earthly representations of the sun god's celestial realm. But already during Ranab's reign, we can see the beginnings of this theological development in the increasing emphasis on solar symbolism in royal art and architecture. The royal tombs of this period begin to show orientations and decorative elements that reflect the path of the sun, while religious texts speak of the pharaoh's soul joining Ra in his solar bark for the eternal journey across the heavens. Ninetjer, whose long reign brought stability and prosperity to the kingdom, demonstrates how successful Second Dynasty pharaohs combined military prowess with administrative skill and religious authority. His name, meaning divine is the god, reflects the theological sophistication of his era, while archaeological evidence suggests that his reign saw significant expansion of Egyptian influence into Nubia and the Sinai Peninsula. These weren't merely military conquests but were understood as extensions of the cosmic order that the pharaoh was duty-bound to maintain. The wealth that flowed into Egypt during Ninetjer's reign from trade and tribute allowed for unprecedented investment in monumental architecture and artistic projects. The royal workshops produced objects of extraordinary beauty and technical sophistication, while provincial governors built tombs and temples that rivaled those of the capital in their grandeur. This cultural flowering was seen not as luxury or extravagance but as a necessary expression of the divine order that the pharaoh embodied. Just as the gods created beauty and harmony in the heavens, so the pharaoh's earthly realm should reflect celestial perfection in every aspect of its material culture. Yet even the most successful Second Dynasty pharaohs faced challenges that tested both their practical abilities and their spiritual authority. Weneg, whose name means the established one, appears to have ruled during a period of internal discord that may have threatened the unity of the kingdom. Some inscriptions suggest conflicts between different regions or between rival claimants to the throne, while others hint at natural disasters, perhaps a series of low Nile floods, that challenged the pharaoh's ability to maintain prosperity and order. These challenges would have been understood not merely as political or economic problems but as threats to the cosmic order itself. In Egyptian thought, the pharaoh's effectiveness as a ruler was directly linked to his spiritual purity and his proper performance of religious duties. Disasters and conflicts were seen as evidence that Ma'at, the divine order of truth and justice, had been disturbed, requiring not only practical solutions but also spiritual remedies including elaborate rituals, temple constructions, and religious reforms. The resolution of such crises often led to significant developments in pharaonic ideology and practice. Sened, who may have succeeded Weneg, appears to have implemented important administrative and religious reforms that strengthened both the practical machinery of government and the spiritual foundations of pharaonic authority. His reign saw the completion of several major temple projects and the codification of religious ceremonies that would remain central to Egyptian royal ritual for centuries to come. Peribsen represents one of the most fascinating and mysterious figures of the Second Dynasty, a pharaoh whose reign reveals the complex theological and political tensions that could arise within the system of divine kingship. Unlike his predecessors and successors, Peribsen chose to associate himself primarily with Seth rather than Horus, the traditional patron deity of pharaohs. This wasn't merely a personal religious preference but represented a fundamental challenge to established pharaonic theology. Seth, the god of chaos and storms, was not necessarily evil in Egyptian thought, but he represented forces that were necessary but dangerous, the creative destruction that cleared away the old to make way for the new, the storms that brought both devastation and renewal. For a pharaoh to identify himself primarily with Seth suggested either a radical theological innovation or a period of such upheaval that traditional associations with order and stability had to be temporarily set aside in favor of more revolutionary approaches. The reign of Peribsen may have been marked by significant military campaigns, religious reforms, or social changes that required the destructive aspects of divine power to clear away obstacles to progress. Archaeological evidence suggests that his reign saw important developments in art and architecture, possibly representing a break with earlier traditions in favor of new styles and techniques. Whether these changes were welcomed or resisted by Egyptian society is impossible to know from the surviving evidence, but Peribsen's unique theological stance suggests a ruler who was willing to challenge conventional wisdom in pursuit of his vision for the kingdom. The mystery deepens with Khemui, who succeeded Peribsen and whose name means, "the two powers appear" or "the two powers are reconciled." This pharaoh appears to have restored the traditional association with Horus while also acknowledging Seth, suggesting either a reconciliation of competing theological factions or a synthesis of opposing divine forces into a new understanding of pharaonic authority. His reign marked the end of the Second Dynasty and the transition to the Old Kingdom, one of the most glorious periods in ancient Egyptian history. Khmemu's monuments demonstrate unprecedented wealth and artistic achievement, suggesting that his reign brought not only political stability but also economic prosperity. His mortuary complex at Abydos was remarkable for its size and sophistication, while inscriptions from his reign describe military victories that extended Egyptian influence far beyond the traditional boundaries of the kingdom. Most significantly, reliefs from his reign show him wearing both the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt simultaneously, emphasizing the unity of the kingdom while also incorporating symbolic elements associated with both Horus and Seth. The theological synthesis achieved during Khmemu's reign would prove to be one of the most important developments in pharaonic ideology, establishing principles that would guide Egyptian kingship throughout the remainder of its long history. The pharaoh was now understood to embody not only the ordered authority of Horus but also the transformative power of Seth, making him capable of both preserving beneficial traditions and implementing necessary changes. This balanced approach to divine kingship would prove essential for the long-term stability of Egyptian civilization, allowing pharaohs to adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining the essential spiritual foundations of their authority. As we drift gently from the Second Dynasty into the Third, we encounter Djoser, a pharaoh whose name would echo through the centuries as one of the most innovative and visionary rulers in Egyptian history. His reign, beginning around 2670 BCE, marked not just the start of a new dynasty but the dawn of what historians call the Old Kingdom, a period when Egyptian civilization reached heights of achievement that would inspire wonder and admiration for millennia to come. Djoser, whose name means sacred or holy, inherited a kingdom that was prosperous and unified, But he was not content merely to maintain the status quo established by his predecessors. Working closely with his brilliant architect and advisor Imhotep, Djoser embarked on projects that would revolutionize Egyptian architecture and establish new standards for pharaonic magnificence that would influence royal building projects for the remainder of Egyptian history. Imhotep, whose name means "the one who comes in peace," was far more than just an architect. He was a polymath whose talents encompassed medicine, astronomy, mathematics, literature, and religious theology. Later generations would remember him as one of the wisest men who ever lived, eventually deifying him as a god of healing and wisdom. But during Djoser's reign, he was the creative genius who conceived and supervised the construction of the first true pyramid in human history. The Step Pyramid of Saqqara, rising in 6 magnificent tiers to a height of over 200 feet, represents a quantum leap in architectural ambition and engineering skill. Previous pharaohs had been buried in mastaba tombs, rectangular structures with sloped sides that rose modestly above the desert floor. But Djoser and Imhotep envisioned something unprecedented, a monument that would reach toward the heavens like a stairway for the pharaoh's soul to ascend to the realm of the gods. The construction of this pyramid required not only unprecedented engineering skills but also the mobilization of resources on a scale never before attempted in human history. Thousands of workers quarried, transported, and precisely fitted over 330,000 tons of limestone blocks, while master craftsmen created the internal chambers and passages that would house the pharaoh's burial and the treasures that would accompany him into the afterlife. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb but a cosmic machine, an architectural representation of the pharaoh's divine nature and his role as mediator between earth and heaven. But the Step Pyramid was only the centerpiece of a vast mortuary complex that covered over 40 acres and included temples, courtyards, underground galleries, and subsidiary buildings designed to serve the pharaoh's needs in the afterlife. The entire complex was surrounded by a limestone wall over 30 feet high, creating a sacred enclosure that separated the divine realm of the dead pharaoh from the mundane world of the living. Within this enclosure, Djoser's Ka, his spiritual double, would continue to rule over Egypt throughout eternity, receiving offerings and performing the religious ceremonies necessary to maintain the cosmic order. The artistic and architectural innovations achieved during Djoser's reign extended far beyond the pyramid complex itself. Royal workshops produced sculptures, reliefs, and decorative objects of unprecedented sophistication, while new techniques in metalworking and jewelry making created treasures of breathtaking beauty. The famous seated statue of Djoser, with its serene expression and regal bearing, captures the essence of pharaonic majesty while demonstrating technical skills that would not be surpassed for centuries. The religious innovations of Djoser's reign were equally significant. The pyramid complex was designed not only as a tomb but as a template for the pharaoh's eternal activities in the afterlife. Ritual chambers within the complex were equipped with everything the pharaoh would need to continue his religious duties after death, while the orientation and proportions of the buildings reflected sophisticated astronomical and mathematical knowledge that linked the pharaoh's eternal journey to the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Sekhemkhet, who succeeded Djoser, attempted to build an even larger pyramid complex at Saqqara, but his project was never completed, perhaps due to a shortened reign or political difficulties. The unfinished pyramid stands today as a haunting reminder of the enormous ambitions that drove Third Dynasty pharaohs and the practical challenges involved in translating those ambitions into reality. Yet even in its incomplete state, Sekhemkhet's pyramid demonstrates the continuing development of architectural and engineering skills that would eventually make possible the perfect pyramids of the Fourth Dynasty. Kaba, another Third Dynasty pharaoh, chose a different location for his pyramid, constructing what is now known as the Layer Pyramid at Zayat el-Aryan. This monument, built in a series of horizontal layers rather than traditional courses, represents continued experimentation with pyramid construction techniques. While it never achieved the fame of Djoser's Step Pyramid, it demonstrates the creative energy and willingness to innovate that characterized the Third Dynasty pharaohs. Huni, the last pharaoh of the 3rd dynasty, ruled during the transition to the 4th dynasty and may have begun construction of the pyramid at Midam that would later be completed by his successor Sneferu. The Midam pyramid represents yet another stage in the evolution of pyramid construction, originally built as a step pyramid but later converted into a true pyramid with smooth sides. This transformation reflects the ongoing development of architectural concepts and construction techniques that would reach their ultimate expression in the pyramids of Giza. The transition from the 3rd to the 4th dynasty brought to the throne one of the most remarkable pharaohs in Egyptian history, a ruler whose architectural achievements would define the Pyramid Age and whose name would be remembered with awe and admiration throughout Egyptian history. Sneferu, whose name means, "He has perfected me," ruled for over 2 decades and during that time oversaw the construction of more pyramid monuments than any other pharaoh before or after him. Sneferu's building projects demonstrate both the enormous resources available to 4th dynasty pharaohs and the sophisticated organizational skills that allowed these resources to be effectively mobilized. His first pyramid at Midam, initially begun as a step pyramid, was converted into a true pyramid with smooth sides, representing a crucial step in the evolution of pyramid architecture. However, structural problems with this monument may have led Sneferu to abandon it in favor of new projects at Dashur. The bent pyramid at Dashur reveals the experimental nature of early 4th dynasty pyramid construction. Originally designed with sides rising at an angle of 54 degrees, the pyramid's angle was reduced to 43 degrees partway through construction, possibly due to stability concerns or the desire to complete the project more quickly. The result is a unique monument that captures a moment of transition in pyramid construction techniques, a permanent record of the learning process that would eventually produce architectural perfection. Sneferu's North Pyramid, also at Dashur, achieved the goal toward which all previous pyramid builders have been working, a true pyramid with perfectly smooth sides rising at the ideal angle to a precise point. This red pyramid, as it's known today due to the reddish limestone used in its construction, was the first successful true pyramid and served as the direct prototype for the even more magnificent pyramids that would be built at Giza during the reign of Sneferu's son and successor. The enormous scale of Sneferu's building projects required not only unprecedented mobilization of labor and resources but also revolutionary developments in organization, logistics, and construction techniques. Teams of workers had to be fed, housed, and organized, materials had to be quarried, transported, and precisely fitted, and the entire project had to be coordinated with the religious and administrative duties of the pharaoh and his court. The successful completion of these projects demonstrates that 4th dynasty Egypt had achieved levels of social organization and technical capability that rivaled or exceeded those of any contemporary civilization. But Sneferu was more than just a great builder. Contemporary inscriptions describe him as a just and beneficent ruler who was beloved by his subjects. He launched successful military campaigns into Nubia and Libya that brought wealth and security to Egypt, while his domestic policies promoted trade, agriculture, and artistic achievement. The prosperity and stability of his reign created the conditions that would allow his son Khufu to undertake the most ambitious construction project in human history. When Khufu ascended to the throne around 2589 BCE, he inherited a kingdom at the height of its power and prosperity, with construction techniques and organizational systems perfected by his father's monumental building projects. But Khufu's vision extended beyond anything that had been attempted before. He would build a pyramid that would serve not only as his tomb but as a permanent symbol of pharaonic power and divine authority that would inspire awe in all who beheld it throughout all future ages. The Great Pyramid of Giza, as Khufu's monument came to be known, was the largest structure ever built by human hands, an achievement that would not be surpassed until the Industrial Age. Rising to an original height of 481 feet and built from over 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite, some weighing as much as 15 tons, the pyramid required engineering and construction skills that modern architects and engineers still admire and study. But the true achievement of the Great Pyramid lies not merely in its size but in the precision of its construction and the sophistication of its design. The pyramid's base forms an almost perfect square, with sides measuring approximately 755 feet each and differing by only a few inches. The orientation of the pyramid is so precise that its sides align with the cardinal directions to within 3/60th of a degree. The internal chambers and passages demonstrate astronomical knowledge that allowed the builders to align key features with important stars and constellations, while the mathematical relationships between the pyramid's dimensions reveal sophisticated understanding of geometry and proportion. The construction of the Great Pyramid required not only unprecedented engineering skills but also the most complex logistical operation ever undertaken in the ancient world. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed the remains of the workers' villages, bakeries, breweries, and medical facilities that supported the thousands of people involved in the pyramid's construction. These workers were not slaves, as popular imagination might suggest, but skilled craftsmen and laborers who were well-fed, properly housed, and honored for their participation in this sacred project. The pyramid complex included not only the Great Pyramid itself but also the smaller pyramids built for Khufu's queens, a mortuary temple connected to the pyramid by a causeway, a valley temple at the edge of the Nile floodplain, and numerous mastaba tombs for members of the royal court. The entire complex was designed as a microcosm of the divine realm, a place where the pharaoh could continue to fulfill his cosmic responsibilities throughout eternity. The religious significance of the Great Pyramid extended far beyond its function as a royal tomb. The pyramid was understood as a resurrection machine, a structure designed to facilitate the pharaoh's transformation from mortal king to divine being. The internal chambers were aligned with stars that were associated with specific deities, while the pyramid's shape represented the primordial mound from which all creation emerged. The pharaoh's burial within this structure was not an ending but a beginning, the start of his eternal journey as a god among the stars. Khufu's reign, while remembered primarily for the Great Pyramid, also saw significant developments in other areas of Egyptian culture and society. Trade expeditions reached distant lands, bringing back exotic materials and foreign luxuries that enhanced the splendor of the royal court. Artistic workshops produced sculptures, reliefs, and decorative objects of extraordinary beauty and technical sophistication, while literary and religious texts were composed that would influence Egyptian thought for centuries to come. The administrative system that managed this complex civilization reached new levels of sophistication during Khufu's reign. A vast bureaucracy of scribes, officials, and administrators recorded transactions, collected taxes, managed royal estates, and coordinated the activities of provincial governors throughout the kingdom. This administrative machinery was essential not only for the pyramid's construction but for maintaining the prosperity and stability that made such monumental projects possible. Djedefre, Khufu's successor, chose to build his pyramid at Abu Rawash, north of Giza, perhaps seeking to establish his own architectural legacy separate from his father's overwhelming achievement. Though his pyramid was never completed and much of its stone was later quarried for other projects, enough remains to show that it would have been a magnificent monument in its own right. Djedefre's reign appears to have been relatively brief, but it witnessed continued prosperity and the maintenance of the high artistic and cultural standards established during the Fourth Dynasty's Golden Age. The religious innovations of Djedefre's reign are particularly noteworthy. He was the first pharaoh to regularly use the title, Son of Ra, formally incorporating solar theology into pharaonic titulature in a way that would become standard for all subsequent rulers. This theological development reflected the growing importance of Ra, the sun god, in Egyptian religion and the increasing identification of the pharaoh with solar divinity. The pharaoh was now understood not merely as the earthly representative of the gods but as the direct offspring of the supreme solar deity, inheriting divine authority through genealogical connection to the creator of the universe. When Khafre ascended to the throne, he chose to build his pyramid complex at Giza alongside his father Khufu's Great Pyramid, creating what would become the most famous and awe-inspiring group of monuments in the ancient world. Khufu's pyramid, though slightly smaller than the Great Pyramid, appears taller due to its position on higher ground and its steeper angle of construction. The visual effect was carefully calculated. The two pyramids dominate the Giza Plateau like twin peaks of an artificial mountain range, symbols of divine power that could be seen from great distances across the Nile Valley. But Khufu's most enduring contribution to pharaonic iconography may be the Great Sphinx, that mysterious guardian that crouches before his pyramid complex like a lion protecting its domain. Carved from a natural outcrop of limestone and enhanced with added masonry, the Sphinx combines the body of a lion with the face of the pharaoh, creating a powerful symbol of royal authority that merges human intelligence with feline strength and solar symbolism. The lion was associated with the sun god in Egyptian mythology, while the human face proclaimed the pharaoh's rational wisdom and divine authority. The Sphinx faces due east, greeting the rising sun each morning with its eternal gaze, and its positioning within the pyramid complex reflects sophisticated understanding of astronomical cycles and solar theology. Ancient texts describe the Sphinx as a manifestation of the god Horemheb, Horus of the horizon, linking it directly to the falcon god who was the pharaoh's divine patron. The monument served not only as a guardian of the royal tombs but as a cosmic symbol, representing the pharaoh's role as mediator between earth and heaven, between the mortal realm and the eternal domain of the gods. Khufu's mortuary temple, connected to his pyramid by a causeway nearly a quarter-mile long, contained some of the finest examples of Old Kingdom sculpture ever discovered. The famous diorite statue of Khufu shows the pharaoh seated on his throne with the falcon god Horus perched behind his head, wings spread protectively around the royal figure. The sculpture captures the essence of divine kingship with remarkable artistic skill, conveying both the pharaoh's human dignity and his supernatural authority with equal conviction. The pyramid complex also included elaborate provisions for the pharaoh's spiritual needs in the afterlife. Storage chambers were filled with food, furniture, clothing, jewelry, and other necessities for eternal existence, while ritual chambers were equipped for the performance of religious ceremonies that would maintain the pharaoh's divine status throughout eternity. The entire complex functioned as a self-contained divine realm where the departed pharaoh could continue to rule over Egypt from beyond the grave. Menkaure, the builder of the third pyramid at Giza, ruled during a period when the enormous resources required for pyramid construction may have begun to strain even Egypt's abundant wealth. His pyramid, though much smaller than those of his predecessors, demonstrates continued mastery of construction techniques and architectural design. The use of granite for the lower courses of the pyramid and the sophisticated internal chamber system show that 4th dynasty builders maintained their technical excellence even while working on a reduced scale. The artistic treasures found in Menkaure's pyramid complex include some of the most beautiful sculptures of the Old Kingdom period. The famous triads showing Menkaure flanked by the goddess Hathor and various known deities demonstrate the continuing development of royal iconography and the increasing complexity of pharaonic religious beliefs. These sculptures weren't merely decorative but served important theological functions, showing the pharaoh's relationship to specific deities and his role as protector of the various regions of Egypt. The reign of Menkaure appears to have been marked by a certain degree of religious reform or innovation. Later traditions remembered him as a particularly pious ruler who was devoted to the gods and concerned with justice and moral behavior. Whether these traditions reflect historical reality or later idealization is impossible to determine, but they suggest that Menkaure's reign may have seen important developments in pharaonic ideology and religious practice. The end of the 4th dynasty marked the close of the Pyramid Age's most spectacular phase, but Egyptian civilization continued to flourish and develop under the pharaohs of the 5th dynasty, who brought new religious ideas and artistic innovations to the traditional framework of divine kingship. The transition from the 4th to the 5th dynasty may have involved changes in the royal succession or shifts in religious emphasis, but it occurred without apparent disruption to Egypt's prosperity and cultural achievements. Userkaf, the first pharaoh of the 5th dynasty, established important precedents that would influence Egyptian religion and architecture for centuries to come. His pyramid, built at Saqqara near the Step Pyramid of Djoser, was much smaller than the 4th dynasty monuments at Giza, but it was accompanied by a revolutionary new type of religious structure, a solar temple dedicated to the worship of Ra. This innovation reflected the growing importance of solar theology in Egyptian religion and the pharaoh's increasingly close identification with the sun god. The solar temple consisted of a large courtyard dominated by a massive obelisk representing the Benben stone, the primordial mound from which the sun god first emerged at the creation of the world. Unlike traditional temples, which were designed as houses for specific deities, the solar temple was open to the sky, allowing the sun's rays to flood the sacred space and emphasize the direct connection between Ra and his earthly representative, the pharaoh. Suhur, Userkaf's successor, built the most magnificent pyramid complex of the 5th dynasty, demonstrating that the new dynasty's smaller pyramids were compensated by increased attention to artistic decoration and architectural refinement. The walls of Suhur's mortuary temple were covered with reliefs of unprecedented beauty and sophistication, depicting scenes of the pharaoh's triumph over foreign enemies, his participation in religious festivals, and his divine journey through the afterlife. These reliefs weren't merely decorative but served important magical and religious functions. By depicting the pharaoh's victories and divine activities, they ensured that these beneficial events would continue throughout eternity. The reliefs functioned as a kind of visual spell, using artistic representation to maintain the pharaoh's power and authority in the spiritual realm just as his mummy and grave goods maintained his physical presence. The artistic innovations of Suhur's reign extended beyond architectural decoration to include developments in sculpture, painting, and decorative arts that would influence Egyptian artistic traditions for centuries. The workshop techniques developed during his reign produced objects of extraordinary beauty and technical sophistication, while new artistic conventions were established that would become standard elements of pharaonic iconography. Neferurker, whose name means, "Beautiful is the soul of Ra," ruled during a period of continued prosperity and cultural achievement. His pyramid complex, though never fully completed, demonstrates the ongoing development of 5th dynasty architectural traditions. The complex included innovative features such as archive rooms where papyrus documents were stored, providing valuable insights into the administrative and religious practices of the Old Kingdom period. The papyri discovered in Neferurker's pyramid complex revealed a sophisticated bureaucratic system that managed the pharaoh's mortuary cult and the enormous endowments that supported it. Teams of priests, administrators, and workers were responsible for maintaining the pyramid complex, performing daily rituals, and ensuring that the pharaoh received the offerings and worship necessary for his continued existence in the afterlife. This mortuary bureaucracy represented a significant portion of Egypt's total economic activity and employed thousands of people throughout the kingdom. Shepsesker and Rainforef, who ruled during the middle years of the 5th dynasty, continued the architectural and religious traditions established by their predecessors while adapting them to changing circumstances and resources. Their pyramid complexes, though smaller and simpler than earlier monuments, maintained the essential elements of pharaonic mortuary architecture while incorporating new features that reflected evolving religious beliefs. The reign of Rainforef is particularly interesting because his pyramid was never completed, providing unique insights into Old Kingdom construction techniques and architectural planning. Archaeological excavations have revealed the ramps, tools, and partially finished blocks that were abandoned when the pharaoh's premature death halted the construction project. These discoveries have helped modern scholars understand how the ancient Egyptians organized and executed their monumental building projects. Nusair, who enjoyed one of the longest reigns of the 5th dynasty, built both a pyramid complex and a solar temple, demonstrating the dual nature of pharaonic religious obligations during this period. His solar temple at Abu Ghurab is the best preserved example of this type of monument, allowing archaeologists to study the architectural and ritual features that characterized solar worship during the Old Kingdom period. The reliefs in Nusair's solar temple provide vivid depictions of the said festival, the pharaoh's jubilee celebration that renewed his divine authority and physical vigor. These scenes show the pharaoh running between specially constructed markers, symbolically demonstrating his continued fitness to rule, while gods and courtiers participate in elaborate ceremonies designed to ensure the kingdom's continued prosperity. The said festival represented one of the most important rituals in pharaonic religion, and its depiction in the solar temple emphasized the connection between royal renewal and solar cycles. Menkaure and Djedkare ruled during the later 5th dynasty, a period when Egyptian civilization reached new heights of cultural sophistication while beginning to show signs of the decentralization that would characterize the subsequent First Intermediate period. Their reign saw continued artistic and architectural achievements, but also the emergence of powerful provincial nobles whose wealth and independence would eventually challenge the absolute authority of the pharaoh. The pyramid complex of Djedkare demonstrates both the achievements and the limitations of later 5th dynasty pharaohs. While smaller than earlier pyramids, it featured sophisticated internal arrangements and beautiful decorative reliefs that show the continued development of pharaonic artistic traditions. The complex also included extensive provisions for members of the royal family, reflecting the increasing importance of royal women and the complex succession arrangements that characterized this period. Unas, the last pharaoh of the 5th dynasty, made one of the most important contributions to Egyptian religious literature by inscribing the earliest known pyramid texts on the walls of his burial chamber. These hieroglyphic inscriptions, covering hundreds of spells and religious formulas, provide the oldest comprehensive record of Egyptian beliefs about death and the afterlife. The pyramid texts would be copied and adapted by later pharaohs, eventually evolving into the coffin texts of the Middle Kingdom and the Book of the Dead of the New Kingdom. The pyramid texts reveal the sophisticated theological concepts that underlay pharaonic religion during the Old Kingdom period. The pharaoh's death was understood not as an ending but as a transformation, a metamorphosis that allowed the royal soul to join the imperishable stars and participate in the eternal cycles of cosmic regeneration. The texts provide detailed instructions for this spiritual journey, including spells for overcoming obstacles, passwords for gaining access to divine realms, and formulas for assuming various divine forms during the afterlife journey. The religious innovations of Unas's reign had profound implications for the development of Egyptian thought and culture. By making explicit the theological concepts that had previously been transmitted through oral tradition or depicted symbolically in art and architecture, the pyramid texts established a textual foundation for Egyptian religion that would influence spiritual beliefs and practices for centuries to come. The transition from the 5th to the 6th dynasty brought to the throne Teti, a pharaoh whose reign marked both the continuation of Old Kingdom traditions and the beginning of changes that would eventually lead to the kingdom's decentralization. Teti's pyramid complex at Saqqara followed established architectural precedents while incorporating pyramid texts that expanded and refined the religious formulas first inscribed in Unas's pyramid. The political circumstances of Teti's accession remain somewhat mysterious, with some evidence suggesting that he may have faced opposition from rival claimants or regional nobles who questioned his legitimacy. Whether such challenges actually occurred is impossible to determine from the surviving evidence, but the later tradition that Teti was assassinated by his own bodyguards suggests that his reign may have been marked by political tensions that were unusual for the Old Kingdom period. Despite any political difficulties he may have faced, Teti's reign saw continued cultural and economic prosperity. Trade expeditions continued to reach distant lands, bringing back exotic materials and luxury goods that enhanced the splendor of the royal court. Artistic workshops produced sculptures and decorative objects that maintained the high standards established during earlier dynasties, while provincial nobles built tombs and monuments that rivaled royal constructions in their beauty and sophistication. Userkare, who may have ruled briefly after Teti, remains one of the most enigmatic figures of the Old Kingdom period. Some scholars interpret the scanty evidence for his reign as suggesting a period of political instability or succession crisis, while others see him as a legitimate pharaoh whose short reign left few surviving monuments. The uncertainty surrounding user care reflects the growing complexity of royal succession arrangements and the increasing importance of powerful court officials who could influence the choice of pharaohs. Pepi I, who ruled for approximately 50 years, presided over what may have been the last period of truly centralized pharaonic authority during the Old Kingdom. His long reign allowed for the completion of ambitious architectural projects and the maintenance of Egypt's extensive trade networks, but it also witnessed the continued growth of provincial power centers that would eventually challenge royal authority. The pyramid complex of Pepi I at Saqqara demonstrates both the achievements and the limitations of 6th dynasty pharaohs. While maintaining the essential elements of traditional mortuary architecture, the complex shows evidence of reduced resources and simplified construction techniques compared to earlier monuments. The reliefs and inscriptions, however, display continued artistic sophistication and provide valuable insights into the religious and political concepts that guided 6th dynasty pharaohs. The provincial nobles who served under Pepi I left extensive biographical inscriptions in their tombs, providing unique glimpses into the daily life and career patterns of the Old Kingdom elite. These texts reveal a society that was still highly centralized in theory but increasingly dependent on the loyalty and cooperation of regional governors who controlled substantial resources and maintained their own military forces. Merenra, who ruled for only about 9 years, may have served as co-regent with his father Pepi I during the final years of the older pharaoh's reign. This arrangement, if it actually occurred, would represent an important development in pharaonic succession practices and may have been designed to ensure a smooth transition of power during a period of increasing political complexity. The brief reign of Merenra left few lasting monuments, but contemporary inscriptions suggest that he maintained the traditional pharaonic responsibilities for military campaigns, religious ceremonies, and administrative oversight. Trade expeditions continued to reach Nubia and other distant lands, while provincial governors maintained their extensive building projects and administrative activities. Pepi II ascended to the throne as a child and ruled for what may have been over 90 years, making his the longest reign in ancient Egyptian history. This extraordinary longevity, while potentially beneficial for governmental stability, may ultimately have contributed to the political decentralization that characterized the later Old Kingdom period. As Pepi II aged, provincial governors became increasingly independent, developing their own administrative systems and military forces that reduced their dependence on royal authority. The early years of Pepi II's reign saw continued prosperity and cultural achievement. His pyramid complex at Saqqara, while smaller than earlier royal monuments, included sophisticated architectural features and beautiful decorative reliefs that demonstrated the continued vitality of pharaonic artistic traditions. The complex also included pyramids for the pharaoh's queens, reflecting the important role that royal women played in 6th dynasty politics and religion. The extensive trade networks that had enriched Egypt throughout the Old Kingdom period continued to function during Pepi II's reign, bringing luxury goods and exotic materials from Nubia, the Levant, and other distant lands. The famous expedition of Harkuf, who traveled to Nubia and brought back a dancing pygmy that delighted the young pharaoh, demonstrates both the extent of Egyptian influence and the personal interests that motivated royal patronage of exploration and trade. As Pepi II's reign progressed, however, signs of governmental decline became increasingly apparent. Provincial governors built tombs and monuments that rivaled royal constructions in their size and splendor, while their biographical inscriptions emphasized their independence and local authority rather than their service to the pharaoh. The centralized administrative system that had managed Egypt's resources since the early dynastic period began to fragment as regional nobles established their own power bases and reduced their tribute payments to the royal treasury. The religious implications of this political decentralization were profound. The pharaoh's role as the unique mediator between the divine and mortal realms was challenged by provincial rulers who claimed their own divine authority and established their own religious institutions. While maintaining nominal loyalty to the pharaoh, these regional governors began to function as independent kings within their own territories, fragmenting the unified cosmic order that had been the foundation of pharaonic ideology since the time of Narmer. The later years of Pepi II's reign saw continued economic and political decline as climate change may have contributed to a series of low Nile floods that reduced agricultural productivity and strained governmental resources. Famine and social disorder became more common, while the pharaoh's advanced age may have limited his ability to respond effectively to these challenges. Contemporary texts from this period reflect growing pessimism and social criticism that contrasted sharply with the confidence and optimism that had characterized earlier periods of Egyptian history. Literary works such as the Admonitions of Epicure describe social upheaval and political chaos, while wisdom literature emphasizes the uncertainty of worldly success and the importance of personal virtue in an unstable world. The death of Pepi II marked the effective end of the Old Kingdom as a period of unified pharaonic authority. His successors, including the mysterious pharaohs Merenra II and Nitocret, ruled over a kingdom that was increasingly fragmented and impoverished. The Great Age of pyramid building had ended, and Egypt was about to enter the turbulent period known as the First Intermediate Period, when competing dynasties would struggle for control of the divided kingdom. Nitocret, who may have been the first woman to rule Egypt as pharaoh in her own right, represents both the desperate expedients that marked the end of the Old Kingdom and the remarkable adaptability that allowed Egyptian civilization to survive periods of political crisis. Later traditions remembered her as a strong and capable ruler who sought to restore royal authority through decisive action, but her reign was too brief and the challenges too great for lasting success. The collapse of centralized pharaonic authority that marked the end of the Old Kingdom was not simply a political phenomenon but represented a fundamental crisis in Egyptian civilization's understanding of cosmic order and divine authority. For over 500 years, Egyptians had believed that the pharaoh's divine nature guaranteed the stability and prosperity of their world. When that authority fragmented and failed, it created both practical problems and spiritual crises that would require new solutions and new approaches to the relationship between rulers and subjects, between the mortal realm and the divine order. Yet even as the Old Kingdom collapsed, the foundations it had established would prove remarkably durable. The artistic traditions, architectural techniques, religious concepts, and administrative practices developed during the Pyramid Age would be preserved, adapted, and renewed by later dynasties. The pharaonic ideal of divine kingship, though temporarily fragmented, would be restored and would continue to guide Egyptian civilization for nearly 2 millennia to come. The First Intermediate Period, spanning roughly from 2181 to 2055 BCE, was a time of division and conflict when multiple dynasties claimed pharaonic authority simultaneously. This era, while politically chaotic, witnessed remarkable cultural and literary achievements that enriched Egyptian civilization and prepared the foundation for the magnificent renewal that would characterize the Middle Kingdom period. During these turbulent centuries, dynasties based in different cities competed for control of Egypt, each claiming to be the legitimate heir to the pharaonic tradition established by Narmer and perfected during the Old Kingdom. The 7th and 8th dynasties, based at Memphis, maintained theoretical claims to rule over all Egypt, but their actual authority was limited to the immediate vicinity of the ancient capital. Meanwhile, the 9th and 10th dynasties, ruling from Heracleopolis in Middle Egypt, controlled the central portion of the kingdom and engaged in ongoing conflicts with rivals in both north and south. The southern city of Thebes, which had been a relatively minor provincial center during the Old Kingdom, emerged during the First Intermediate Period as the seat of the 11th dynasty, whose rulers would eventually reunify Egypt and establish the Middle Kingdom. The rise of Thebes reflected broader changes in Egyptian society and politics, as new regions gained prominence and previously marginal areas developed their own cultural traditions and political ambitions. The pharaohs of the First Intermediate Period, despite ruling over divided territories, maintained many of the traditional forms and ceremonies of divine kingship. They built tombs and temples, patronized artistic projects, and claimed the religious authority that had always been associated with pharaonic rule. However, their monuments were generally smaller and less sophisticated than those of the Old Kingdom, reflecting both reduced resources and the fragmentation of the skilled craft traditions that had produced the masterpieces of earlier periods. Intef I, the founder of the 11th dynasty at Thebes, began as a provincial governor who gradually expanded his authority over neighboring regions through military conquest and diplomatic alliances. His successors, Intef II and Intef III, continued this expansion while developing distinctive Theban traditions in art, architecture, and religious practice that would eventually influence the culture of reunified Egypt. The tombs of the Intef pharaohs at Thebes demonstrate both continuity with earlier pharaonic traditions and significant innovations that reflected the changing political and cultural circumstances of the First Intermediate Period. These monuments, carved into the rocky cliffs overlooking the Nile, established architectural precedents that would influence royal tomb construction throughout the Middle Kingdom and into the New Kingdom period. The literary achievements of the First Intermediate Period were particularly remarkable, producing some of the finest examples of Egyptian literature and philosophical reflection. Works such as the Instruction for Mary Care and the Instruction of Amenemhat provide insights into the political wisdom and moral philosophy that guided pharaohs during this period of crisis and renewal. These texts reveal rulers who were acutely aware of the challenges they faced and who sought to articulate new approaches to leadership and governance that could restore stability and prosperity to their troubled kingdom. The Prophecy of Nefertiti and other apocalyptic texts from this period describe the social upheaval and political chaos that characterized the First Intermediate Period, but they also express hope for eventual renewal under a righteous king who would restore Maya to the land. These works weren't merely literary exercises but represented serious attempts to understand the causes of Egypt's troubles and to envision solutions that could restore the kingdom's former greatness. The religious developments of the First Intermediate Period were equally significant, as the fragmentation of centralized authority led to increased emphasis on personal piety and individual relationships with the gods. The democratization of afterlife beliefs, which had begun during the late Old Kingdom, accelerated during this period as non-royal Egyptians gained access to funerary texts and mortuary practices that had previously been reserved for pharaohs and their immediate families. Mentuhotep II, the Theban pharaoh who successfully reunified Egypt around 2055 BCE, accomplished one of the most remarkable achievements in ancient Egyptian history. Through a combination of military skill, diplomatic wisdom, and religious authority, he overcame the divided loyalties and competing claims that had fragmented the kingdom for over a century and restored centralized pharaonic rule that would endure for nearly 400 years. The process of reunification was gradual and complex, requiring not only military victories but also the careful integration of different regional traditions and the restoration of royal authority in areas that had been independent for generations. Mentuhotep II's success in this endeavor demonstrated both his personal abilities and the enduring appeal of pharaonic ideology among Egyptians who had experienced the chaos and uncertainty that resulted from political fragmentation. The monuments that Mentuhotep II constructed at Thebes, particularly his magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, established new standards for pharaonic architecture that combined traditional elements with innovative features reflecting the changed circumstances of Egyptian kingship. This temple, with its terraced design and integration into the natural landscape, would serve as the inspiration for some of the most beautiful monuments of later periods, including the temple built by Hatshepsut at the same site over 500 years later. The artistic renaissance that began under Mentuhotep II demonstrated the remarkable resilience of Egyptian cultural traditions and their ability to renew themselves after periods of decline and fragmentation. Workshops throughout Egypt began producing sculptures, reliefs, and decorative objects that equaled or surpassed the achievements of the Old Kingdom, while new artistic conventions were developed that would influence Egyptian art for centuries to come. Mentuhotep III and Mentuhotep IV continued the work of consolidation and renewal begun by their predecessor, strengthening royal authority while promoting trade, agriculture, and cultural development throughout the reunified kingdom. Their reigns saw the restoration of Egypt's traditional trade networks and the resumption of ambitious building projects that demonstrated the kingdom's renewed prosperity and confidence. The transition from the 11th to the 12th dynasty brought to the throne Amenemhat I, a pharaoh whose origins remain somewhat mysterious but whose achievements established the Middle Kingdom as one of the most successful periods in Egyptian history. Amenemhat I, whose name means Ammonius is foremost, reflected the growing importance of the Theban god Ammonius, who would eventually become identified with Ra as Ammonius Ra, the supreme deity of the Egyptian pantheon. The reign of Amenemhat I marked the beginning of a new approach to pharaonic rule that combined traditional divine authority with more pragmatic and flexible governmental policies. Unlike their Old Kingdom predecessors, Middle Kingdom pharaohs actively promoted the development of provincial centers and encouraged the emergence of a middle class of officials and artisans whose loyalty was earned through opportunity and reward rather than imposed through divine authority alone. Amenemhat I's decision to move the capital from Thebes to Ichtaui, a new city built near the junction of Upper and Lower Egypt, reflected his understanding of the need to balance regional interests and maintain unity through inclusive policies rather than domination by any single area. This new capital, whose name means Caesar of the Two Lands, served as both a practical administrative center and a symbolic representation of national unity. The co-regency system established by Amenemhat I, whereby the pharaoh associated his heir as junior partner in government several years before his own death, represented an important innovation in pharaonic succession practices. This system, which would be used by most subsequent Middle Kingdom pharaohs, helped ensure smooth transitions of power while providing incoming rulers with valuable experience in governmental administration and royal responsibilities. Senusret I, who ruled first as co-regent with his father and then independently for over 40 years, presided over a period of unprecedented prosperity and cultural achievement that established the Middle Kingdom as worthy successor to the glorious Old Kingdom period. His reign saw the construction of magnificent temples and monuments throughout Egypt, the expansion of trade networks to include new regions and peoples, and the development of literary and artistic traditions that would influence Egyptian culture for centuries. The pyramid complex of Senusret I at Lish demonstrated the Middle Kingdom pharaoh's ability to adapt traditional architectural forms to new circumstances and resources. While maintaining the essential elements of pharaonic mortuary architecture, the complex incorporated innovative features that reflected both practical considerations and evolving religious beliefs about the pharaoh's afterlife journey. The literary achievements of Senusret I's reign included the composition of some of the finest examples of Middle Egyptian literature, including works that would be copied and studied in Egyptian schools for over 1,000 years. The Story of Sinew, which may date from this period, represents one of the masterpieces of world literature and provides valuable insights into Egyptian attitudes toward kingship, loyalty, and cultural identity. Amenemhat II continued his predecessor's policies of expansion and development while facing new challenges that required adaptations in pharaonic strategy and tactics. His reign saw significant military campaigns in Nubia and the Levant that extended Egyptian influence while bringing wealth and resources that supported continued prosperity at home. The diplomatic activities of Amenemhat II's reign demonstrated the Middle Kingdom pharaohs' sophisticated understanding of international relations and their willingness to use negotiation and alliance as well as military force to achieve their objectives. Treaties and trade agreements with foreign rulers established Egypt as a major player in the complex diplomatic networks that connected the ancient Near East during this period. Senusret II, though his reign was relatively brief, made important contributions to Egyptian agricultural development through major irrigation and land reclamation projects in the Fayum region. These engineering achievements, which created thousands of acres of new farmland, demonstrated the Middle Kingdom pharaohs' commitment to practical improvements in their subjects' living conditions as well as to the grand ceremonial and religious projects that had traditionally occupied royal attention. The jewelry and decorative objects found in the tomb of Princess Sithethorianit, daughter of Senusret II, represent some of the finest examples of Middle Kingdom craftsmanship and provide insights into the sophisticated artistic traditions that flourished during this period. These treasures demonstrate technical skills and aesthetic sensibilities that rival the achievements of any period in Egyptian history. Senusret III, who ruled for nearly 40 years, may have been the most effective and influential pharaoh of the Middle Kingdom period. His reign saw significant administrative reforms that strengthened central authority while promoting efficient government throughout the kingdom. Military campaigns extended Egyptian control deep into Nubia, while diplomatic initiatives established peaceful relations with neighboring peoples and promoted trade and cultural exchange. The administrative reforms implemented by Senusret III included the reorganization of provincial government and the establishment of new systems for tax collection, military service, and judicial administration. These changes strengthened royal authority while creating more efficient and responsive governmental institutions that better served the needs of Egypt's growing population and expanding economy. The military achievements of Senusret III's reign established Egypt as the dominant power in northeastern Africa and significantly enhanced the kingdom's wealth and security. The fortresses he built along the Nile in Nubia represented engineering achievements that rivaled the pyramids in their technical sophistication, while the wealth extracted from Nubian gold mines funded ambitious construction projects throughout Egypt. The 21st dynasty, ruling from Tanis in the Delta while the high priests of Ammonius controlled Thebes as virtual pharaohs, maintained the traditional forms of pharaonic rule despite controlling only a portion of Egypt's territory. Smendes and his successors demonstrated the continuing appeal of pharaonic ideology even when the practical reality of royal power was severely limited. The pharaohs of Tanis, including Amenemtesu, Susens I, and Amenemop, built magnificent tombs filled with treasures that rivaled those of earlier periods and demonstrated that pharaonic wealth and artistic patronage could survive even during periods of political weakness. The silver coffins and gold burial masks found in their tombs at Tanis represent some of the finest examples of Egyptian metalworking and artistic achievement. The 22nd dynasty, established by Shoshenkai around 945 BCE, brought rulers of Libyan origin to the pharaonic throne while maintaining Egyptian religious and cultural traditions. Shoshenkai, who may be the biblical Shishak who invaded Jerusalem during the reign of Rehoboam, demonstrated that foreign rulers could successfully adopt pharaonic ideology and institutions while adding their own cultural elements to the Egyptian synthesis. The military campaigns of Shoshenkai and his successors temporarily restored Egyptian influence in Palestine and Syria, demonstrating that skilled leadership could still mobilize Egypt's resources for successful imperial expansion even during periods of internal division. The Bubastite portal at Karnak, with its scenes of Shoshenq's Asiatic campaigns, showed that pharaonic propaganda and artistic traditions continued to serve royal purposes during the Libyan period. The later pharaohs of the 22nd dynasty, including Osorkon I, Taklot I, and Osorkon II, maintained pharaonic traditions while facing increasing challenges from rival dynasties and the fragmentation of royal authority. The period witnessed the emergence of multiple pharaohs ruling simultaneously in different parts of Egypt, creating a complex political situation that challenged traditional concepts of unified pharaonic rule. The 23rd and 24th dynasties represented further fragmentation of pharaonic authority as rival claimants established independent kingdoms in different parts of Egypt. These competing pharaohs maintained the traditional titles and ceremonies of divine kingship while controlling only limited territories and resources. Tefnakht and Baconrenef, the pharaohs of the 24th dynasty ruling from Sais in the Delta, attempted to restore unified pharaonic authority through military conquest and diplomatic alliance. Their efforts, though ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrated the continuing vitality of pharaonic institutions and the persistent appeal of national unity among Egyptians who had experienced the disadvantages of political fragmentation. The Kushite conquest of Egypt around 750 BCE brought rulers from Nubia to the pharaonic throne and established the 25th dynasty as champions of traditional Egyptian religion and culture. Kashta, Pi, Shabaka, Shabitku, and Taharqa demonstrated that foreign rulers could not only adopt pharaonic institutions but could also revitalize them and restore Egypt to a position of international influence and respect. The Kushite pharaohs' emphasis on traditional Egyptian religion and their massive construction projects at both Egyptian and Nubian sites demonstrated their commitment to preserving and revitalizing pharaonic civilization. Their patronage of learning and literature produced some of the finest examples of late-period Egyptian art and scholarship while preserving ancient texts and traditions that might otherwise have been lost. Taharka's reign represented the high point of Kushite rule and witnessed Egypt's last period of significant international influence before the Persian conquest. His military campaigns in Palestine and his diplomatic relations with Assyrian and Babylonian powers demonstrated that skillful pharaonic leadership could still make Egypt a major player in Near Eastern politics. The Assyrian invasions during the later 25th dynasty marked the beginning of the end for Kushite rule and demonstrated the military superiority that Near Eastern empires had achieved over Egypt. The campaigns of Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal forced the Kushite pharaohs to retreat to Nubia while establishing Assyrian control over Egypt for the first time in the kingdom's long history. The 26th dynasty, established by Santikai around 664 BCE with Assyrian support, marked the beginning of the Sate period and the last great revival of native Egyptian pharaonic rule. Santikai and his successors demonstrated remarkable skill in exploiting changing international circumstances to restore Egyptian independence and revitalize pharaonic institutions. The cultural renaissance that characterized the Sate period included deliberate revival of Old Kingdom artistic styles and religious practices, demonstrating the pharaoh's understanding of the connection between cultural continuity and political legitimacy. The archaizing tendencies of Sate art and architecture created masterpieces that combined technical perfection with spiritual depth while linking contemporary pharaohs to the great rulers of Egypt's Golden Age. Necho II, Santik II, and Apries continued the policies of restoration and revival while facing increasing pressure from the expanding Persian Empire. Their reigns witnessed successful military campaigns, ambitious construction projects, and cultural achievements that demonstrated the continuing vitality of pharaonic civilization even as external threats multiplied. The reign of Amasis represented perhaps the last period of genuine prosperity and cultural achievement under native Egyptian rule. His long reign of 44 years provided stability that allowed for the completion of major construction projects and the development of trade relationships that brought wealth and international recognition to Egypt. Santik III, the last native pharaoh before the Persian conquest, ruled for only 6 months before being defeated by Cambyses and the Persian army. His brief reign marked the end of over 3 millennia of native Egyptian pharaonic rule and the beginning of the late period, when Egypt would be governed by foreign empires. The Persian conquest of 525 BCE established Egypt as a satrapy of the Achaemenid Empire while maintaining many pharaonic institutions and traditions under foreign supervision. Cambyses and his successors adopted pharaonic titles and participated in Egyptian religious ceremonies while introducing Persian administrative and military practices. Darius I, who ruled Egypt as part of his vast empire, demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Egyptian traditions and institutions while implementing reforms that integrated the kingdom into the Persian imperial system. His construction projects and legal codification showed respect for Egyptian culture while establishing Persian authority over all aspects of governmental and religious life. The revolts that periodically challenged Persian rule during the 5th and 4th centuries BCE demonstrated the continuing appeal of pharaonic ideology and the persistent Egyptian desire for independence. Leaders like Aneros and Amartius adopted pharaonic titles and symbols while organizing resistance that sometimes achieved temporary success before being crushed by Persian military superiority. The 28th, 29th, and 30th dynasties represented brief periods of restored Egyptian independence when native rulers again assumed pharaonic titles and attempted to revive traditional institutions and practices. These dynasties, though short-lived, demonstrated the remarkable resilience of pharaonic ideology and its continued relevance to Egyptian political and religious life. Nectanebo I and Nectanebo II, the most successful pharaohs of the 30th dynasty, achieved significant military and diplomatic successes while promoting cultural and religious revival that recalled the great achievements of earlier periods. Their reigns witnessed major construction projects, artistic innovations, and international alliances that temporarily restored Egypt to a position of regional importance. The final Persian conquest under Artaxerxes III in 343 BCE marked the definitive end of native Egyptian pharaonic rule and established foreign domination that would continue, with only brief interruptions, until the Arab conquest over 1,000 years later. The arrival of Alexander the Great in 332 BCE brought Greek rule to Egypt while maintaining many pharaonic institutions and traditions under Macedonian supervision. Alexander's visit to the Oracle of Ammonius at Siwa and his assumption of pharaonic titles demonstrated the continuing importance of Egyptian religious legitimation for rulers who sought to govern the kingdom effectively. The Ptolemaic dynasty, established by Alexander's general Ptolemy I, ruled Egypt for 3 centuries while adopting pharaonic titles and participating in Egyptian religious ceremonies. The Ptolemies demonstrated that foreign rulers could successfully maintain pharaonic institutions while introducing Greek cultural and administrative innovations that enriched Egyptian civilization. Ptolemy II, Ptolemy III, and their successors built magnificent monuments, patronized learning and literature, and maintained the essential elements of pharaonic rule while creating a unique Greco-Egyptian synthesis that influenced Mediterranean civilization for centuries. The Library of Alexandria, the Pharos Lighthouse, and the magnificent temples built during the Ptolemaic period represented the final flowering of pharaonic architectural and cultural achievement. The later Ptolemies faced increasing challenges from Roman expansion and internal dynastic conflicts that weakened their ability to maintain effective rule over Egypt. The famous Cleopatra VII, the last active pharaoh of Egypt, demonstrated remarkable political skill and cultural sophistication in her attempts to preserve Egyptian independence through alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Cleopatra's reign represented both the culmination and the end of over 3 millennia of pharaonic rule. Her mastery of multiple languages, her participation in Egyptian religious ceremonies, and her sophisticated understanding of international diplomacy demonstrated that the pharaonic tradition had retained its vitality even under foreign dynasties and challenging circumstances. The defeat of Cleopatra and Mark Antony by Octavian at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE marked the end of pharaonic rule and the beginning of Egypt's incorporation into the Roman Empire. Cleopatra's suicide in 30 BCE brought to a close the longest continuous monarchical tradition in human history and ended an institution that had shaped Egyptian civilization for over 3,000 years. The Roman conquest transformed Egypt into a province of the Roman Empire while preserving many pharaonic institutions and traditions for administrative and religious purposes. The Roman emperors adopted certain pharaonic titles and participated in some Egyptian religious ceremonies, but they ruled Egypt as foreign conquerors rather than as legitimate heirs to the pharaonic tradition. The survival of pharaonic symbolism and religious practices under Roman rule demonstrated the profound influence that 3 millennia of divine kingship had exerted on Egyptian culture and society. Even as political independence ended, the artistic, architectural, and spiritual legacy of the pharaohs continued to influence Egyptian life and would be preserved through the Coptic Christian period and into the Islamic era. The conversion of Egypt to Christianity during the late Roman period brought new religious concepts that challenged pharaonic traditions while incorporating many elements of ancient Egyptian spirituality and symbolism. The Coptic Church preserved knowledge of hieroglyphic writing and ancient religious practices that would prove invaluable for later scholars seeking to understand pharaonic civilization. The Arab conquest of Egypt in 641 CE established Islamic rule while preserving many ancient monuments and traditions that connected the new Islamic civilization to the pharaonic past. The continuing presence of the pyramids, temples, and other pharaonic monuments served as permanent reminders of Egypt's ancient greatness and inspired both Islamic scholars and European visitors who sought to understand the achievements of the pharaohs. The medieval period witnessed growing European interest in ancient Egypt and the beginning of serious scholarly efforts to decipher hieroglyphic writing and understand pharaonic history. The accounts of Arab historians like al-Makrizi and the reports of European travelers gradually built up a body of knowledge about ancient Egypt that would culminate in the modern science of Egyptology. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799 and its decipherment by Jean-François Champollion in 1822 opened the door to direct understanding of ancient Egyptian texts and began the modern recovery of pharaonic history. For the first time in over a millennium, the words of the pharaohs could be read and their achievements understood through their own records rather than through the accounts of foreign observers. The development of scientific archaeology during the 19th and 20th centuries revealed the material remains of pharaonic civilization and provided unprecedented insights into the daily life, religious practices, and cultural achievements of ancient Egypt. The discovery of intact royal tombs, the excavation of ancient cities, and the careful study of artifacts and inscriptions gradually reconstructed the full scope of pharaonic achievement. The modern understanding of pharaonic civilization has revealed it to be one of the most remarkable achievements in human history, a civilization that maintained cultural continuity and political stability for over 3 millennia while producing artistic, architectural, and intellectual achievements that continue to inspire wonder and admiration. The pharaohs created not merely a political system but a comprehensive approach to human organization that integrated religious belief, artistic expression, and practical governance in ways that had never been attempted before and have rarely been equaled since. The legacy of the pharaohs extends far beyond the monuments and artifacts that survive from their reign. Their concept of divine kingship influenced political thought throughout the ancient world and provided models for royal authority that shaped the development of monarchy in many different cultures. Their artistic achievements established aesthetic principles and technical standards that influenced Mediterranean and European art for centuries. The religious and philosophical concepts developed by pharaonic civilization contributed to the formation of later religious traditions and continue to influence spiritual thought in the modern world. The Egyptian emphasis on the afterlife, the importance of moral behavior, and the connection between divine and human realms provided conceptual frameworks that were adopted and adapted by other civilizations throughout history. The scientific and technological achievements of pharaonic Egypt, including their mastery of astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and engineering, laid foundations for later developments in these fields and demonstrated levels of technical sophistication that were not surpassed for many centuries. The precision of pyramid construction, the accuracy of their calendar, and the effectiveness of their medical treatments showed that pharaonic civilization had achieved remarkable understanding of natural laws and practical applications. The administrative and legal innovations of pharaonic government created institutional precedents that influenced the development of governmental systems throughout the ancient world. The concept of centralized administration, the importance of written records, and the integration of religious and secular authority provided models for effective governance that were studied and imitated by later civilizations. The cultural synthesis that pharaonic civilization achieved, combining indigenous African traditions with influences from the Near East and Mediterranean world, created a unique and distinctive culture that maintained its essential characteristics while adapting to changing circumstances over 3 millennia. This achievement demonstrates the possibility of creating stable, enduring civilizations that can maintain their core identity while remaining open to beneficial innovations and influences. The study of pharaonic civilization continues to provide insights into fundamental questions about human nature, social organization, and cultural development that remain relevant to contemporary discussions about politics, religion, and society. The pharaoh's success in creating and maintaining one of history's most stable and prosperous civilizations offers lessons that extend far beyond the specific historical context of ancient Egypt. The enduring fascination that pharaonic Egypt exercises over the modern imagination reflects not merely curiosity about exotic ancient cultures but recognition of genuine achievements that continue to command respect and admiration. The pharaohs created a civilization that succeeded in addressing basic human needs for security, meaning, and beauty in ways that produced lasting satisfaction for millions of people over many generations. The monuments that the pharaohs left behind serve as permanent testimonies to human creative potential and the possibility of achieving greatness through sustained effort, clear vision, and effective organization. The pyramids, temples, sculptures, and paintings that survive from pharaonic Egypt continue to inspire contemporary artists, architects, and thinkers who recognize in these achievements models of excellence that transcend their specific historical circumstances. The preservation and study of pharaonic heritage represents not merely an academic exercise but a contribution to human understanding and cultural enrichment that benefits all humanity. The recovery of pharaonic history and the continuing study of ancient Egyptian civilization provide perspectives on human achievement and potential that enrich our understanding of what civilizations can accomplish when they successfully integrate practical governance with spiritual vision. The pharaohs created a civilization that was both deeply rooted in its own time and place and universally relevant in its achievements and insights. Their success in maintaining political stability, cultural continuity, and spiritual depth over 3 millennia provides a model of human achievement that continues to inspire and instruct those who seek to understand the possibilities and limitations of human civilization. As we reflect on the long story of the pharaohs, from Narmer's unification of Egypt over 5,000 years ago to Cleopatra's tragic end in 30 BCE, we see not merely a succession of rulers but a continuous tradition of human striving for excellence, meaning, and lasting achievement. Each pharaoh, whether great or humble, successful or tragic, contributed to a collective enterprise that produced one of humanity's most remarkable civilizations. Amenhotep III, who ruled for 38 years during the height of New Kingdom prosperity and cultural achievement, presided over what may have been the most magnificent court in the ancient world. His reign, characterized by unprecedented wealth, artistic sophistication, and diplomatic prestige, established standards of pharaonic magnificence that would influence royal culture throughout the remainder of Egyptian history. The diplomatic correspondence discovered at Amarna, dating from the reigns of Amenhotep III and his successor, reveals the complex network of alliances, trade relationships, and cultural exchanges that connected Egypt with kingdoms throughout the Near East and Mediterranean world. These letters, written in Akkadian cuneiform on clay tablets, provide unique insights into the international diplomacy and royal correspondence that maintained the complex relationships between ancient kingdoms. The artistic achievements of Amenhotep III's reign represent the culmination of New Kingdom artistic development and demonstrate technical skills and aesthetic sophistication that rival the achievements of any period in human history. The sculptures, paintings, and decorative objects produced during his reign established artistic standards that would influence Egyptian culture for centuries while creating masterpieces that continue to inspire wonder and admiration today. The temple construction projects undertaken during Amenhotep III's reign, including the magnificent temple complex at Luxor and major additions to Karnak, demonstrated the pharaoh's understanding of architecture as a means of expressing divine authority and creating appropriate settings for religious ceremonies. These monuments, with their perfect proportions and sophisticated decorative programs, represent the highest achievements of Egyptian architectural art. The religious developments of Amenhotep III's reign prepared the foundation for the dramatic changes that would characterize his successor's rule. The increased emphasis on solar theology and the growing identification of the pharaoh with the sun god created theological concepts that would be taken to their logical extreme during the Amarna period. Amenhotep IV, who later changed his name to Akhenaten, ascended to the throne around 1353 BCE and initiated one of the most revolutionary periods in Egyptian history. His reign, lasting approximately 17 years, witnessed unprecedented changes in religion, art, politics, and culture that challenged fundamental assumptions about pharaonic authority and divine order. The religious revolution that Akhenaten initiated centered on the promotion of Aten, the solar disk, as the sole deity worthy of worship, effectively establishing the first monotheistic religion in recorded history. This radical departure from traditional Egyptian polytheism challenged not only religious practices but also the entire social and political structure that had been built around the worship of multiple deities. The artistic revolution that accompanied Akhenaten's religious reforms produced some of the most distinctive and innovative art in Egyptian history. The naturalistic style that emerged during his reign, with its emphasis on realistic depiction of the human form and intimate family scenes, represented a dramatic break from the idealized conventions that had characterized Egyptian art for over a millennium. The construction of Akkad, the new capital city dedicated to Aten, represented the physical manifestation of Akhenaten's revolutionary vision and demonstrated his commitment to creating an entirely new religious and cultural order. This city, built on previously unoccupied land at what is now known as Amarna, was designed according to religious principles that emphasized the direct relationship between the pharaoh, his family, and the solar deity. The domestic and international consequences of Akhenaten's reforms were profound and far-reaching. The neglect of traditional deities alienated the powerful priesthoods that had supported pharaonic authority for centuries, while the emphasis on religious innovation may have distracted attention from the practical requirements of imperial administration and military defense. Nefertiti, Akhenaten's queen, played a crucial role in the religious and artistic revolution that characterized the Amarna period. Her beauty, celebrated in some of the finest sculptures ever created, became a symbol of the new artistic style, while her apparent influence over royal policy challenged traditional assumptions about the role of royal women in Egyptian government. The later years of Akhenaten's reign witnessed increasing difficulties as the consequences of religious and political revolution became apparent. Archaeological evidence suggests that the royal family may have faced opposition from traditionalist factions, while international correspondence reveals the growing challenges to Egyptian imperial authority that resulted from reduced attention to foreign affairs. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Akhenaten's death and the succession crisis that followed demonstrated the instability that religious revolution had created within the pharaonic system. The brief reigns of Smenkhare and the young Tutankhamun reflected the struggle between reformist and traditionalist factions to control the direction of Egyptian policy and restore stability to the kingdom. Tutankhamun, who became pharaoh at approximately 9 years of age, ruled during the gradual restoration of traditional religious practices and the abandonment of the Amarna experiment. His reign, though lasting only about 9 years, witnessed significant efforts to repair the damage that revolutionary policies had caused to Egypt's internal stability and international prestige. The religious restoration that began during Tutankhamun's reign involved not only the return to traditional polytheistic worship but also massive construction projects designed to repair and restore the temples and shrines that had been neglected or damaged during the Amarna period. These projects demonstrated the young pharaoh's commitment to traditional religious practices while providing employment for the skilled craftsmen who had been displaced by the previous regime's policies. The artistic legacy of Tutankhamun's reign includes not only the magnificent treasures found in his tomb but also the masterpieces created during the restoration of traditional artistic styles and religious iconography. The synthesis of Amarna innovations with traditional conventions produced some of the finest examples of Egyptian art while establishing precedents that would influence artistic development for centuries. The international situation that Tutankhamun inherited required careful diplomatic and military attention to restore Egyptian prestige and authority. The neglect of imperial administration during the Amarna period had allowed subject territories to become restive while encouraging foreign enemies to challenge Egyptian authority in regions that had been securely controlled for generations. I, who succeeded Tutankhamun and ruled for approximately 4 years, continued the process of restoration while facing increasing challenges from rival claimants and foreign enemies. His background as a high official during the Amarna period gave him unique insights into the problems that needed to be addressed, but his advanced age and lack of military experience limited his ability to deal effectively with all the challenges he faced. The succession of Horemheb, a military commander who had served under previous pharaohs, marked the final stage in the restoration process and the establishment of policies that would guide Egypt throughout the remainder of the New Kingdom period. His reign, lasting approximately 28 years, restored internal stability and international prestige while preparing the foundation for the imperial revival that would characterize the 19th dynasty. The administrative reforms implemented by Horemheb addressed the governmental weaknesses that the Amarna period had revealed while strengthening the institutions that would support renewed imperial expansion. His emphasis on military organization and judicial reform created the administrative infrastructure that would enable his successors to restore Egyptian dominance throughout the Near East. The religious policies of Horemheb's reign completed the rejection of Amarna innovations while establishing orthodoxies that would guide Egyptian religion for the remainder of pharaonic history. The systematic persecution of Akhenaten's memory and the destruction of Amarna monuments demonstrated the determination to eliminate all traces of the revolutionary period while restoring traditional religious practices. The succession arrangements that Horemheb established, including his selection of Ramesses I as his heir despite the lack of blood relationship, demonstrated the pragmatic approach to royal succession that would characterize later New Kingdom politics. The choice of a military commander with strong administrative experience over potential claimants with better genealogical credentials reflected the lessons learned during the succession crises of the Amarna period. Ramesses I, though he ruled for only 2 years, established the 19th dynasty as the agent of Egyptian revival and imperial restoration. His brief reign focused primarily on consolidating the achievements of his predecessor while preparing for the more ambitious policies that his son and grandson would implement. Seti I, who succeeded his father Ramesses I, launched the imperial revival that would make the 19th dynasty one of the most successful in Egyptian history. His military campaigns restored Egyptian authority in Syria and Palestine while demonstrating the continuing effectiveness of Egyptian military organization and tactics. The artistic and architectural achievements of Seti I's reign, particularly his magnificent tomb in the Valley of the Kings and his temple at Abydos, represent the full restoration of traditional Egyptian artistic excellence and religious orthodoxy. These monuments demonstrate the complete rejection of Amarna innovations in favor of classical Egyptian styles and conventions. The international diplomacy of Seti I's reign established the foundation for the complex relationships with Hittite and Assyrian powers that would characterize later New Kingdom foreign policy. His campaigns in Syria brought him into direct conflict with the Hittite Empire, establishing the rivalry that would dominate Near Eastern politics for the next century. Ramesses II, who succeeded his father around 1279 BCE, ruled for 66 years and became one of the most famous pharaohs in Egyptian history. His reign saw the continuation of imperial expansion, the conclusion of the first recorded peace treaty in history, and the construction of some of the most magnificent monuments ever built in ancient Egypt. The military campaigns of Ramesses II, particularly the famous Battle of Kadesh fought against the Hittites, demonstrated both the continuing strength of Egyptian military organization and the practical limitations that imperial expansion faced in an era of competing great powers. The battle, though claimed as a victory by both sides, revealed the need for diplomatic rather than military solutions to the conflicts between Egypt and its imperial rivals. The peace treaty concluded between Ramesses II and the Hittite king Hattusili III represents one of the most significant diplomatic achievements of the ancient world and established principles of international law that would influence diplomatic practice for centuries. The treaty, preserved in both Egyptian and Hittite versions, created a stable peace that allowed both empires to focus on internal development and peaceful competition rather than destructive warfare. The architectural achievements of Ramesses II's reign, including the magnificent temples at Abu Simbel and massive additions to complexes throughout Egypt, represent the culmination of New Kingdom monumental architecture and demonstrate the enormous resources that successful imperial policy had made available. These monuments served not only as religious centers but also as propaganda tools that proclaimed pharaonic authority to both domestic and foreign audiences. The domestic policies of Ramesses II's reign promoted prosperity and cultural development throughout Egypt while maintaining the administrative and military systems that supported imperial authority. The long duration of his reign provided stability that allowed for long-term planning and the completion of ambitious projects that required sustained effort over many years. The later years of Ramesses II's reign witnessed the beginning of challenges that would ultimately undermine New Kingdom imperial authority. The emergence of new powers in the Near East, including the Sea Peoples and revived Assyrian expansion, created threats that required new approaches to military and diplomatic strategy. Merneptah, who succeeded his father after serving as crown prince for many years, inherited an empire that was still powerful but faced increasing challenges from external enemies and internal pressures. His reign, lasting approximately 10 years, demonstrated both the continuing strengths of the pharaonic system and the growing difficulties that imperial maintenance faced in a changing international environment. The military campaigns of Merneptah's reign, including his victories over Libyan invaders and various Canaanite cities, maintained Egyptian authority while revealing the increasing pressure that foreign peoples were placing on Egypt's traditional sphere of influence. The famous Israel Stela from his reign provides the first recorded mention of Israel in ancient Near Eastern texts and demonstrates the complex ethnic and political situation that Egyptian imperialism faced in Palestine. The succession crisis that followed Merneptah's death revealed the institutional weaknesses that were beginning to undermine pharaonic authority and imperial control. The brief reigns of Amenmès and Seti II reflected the growing power of rival factions within the royal family and the administrative hierarchy. Siptah and Queen Tawasret, the last rulers of the 19th dynasty, presided over a period of increasing internal disorder and external pressure that foreshadowed the difficulties that would characterize the late New Kingdom period. Their reigns witnessed the beginning of the fragmentation of imperial authority and the emergence of autonomous power centers within Egypt itself. The transition from the 19th to the 20th dynasty brought to the throne Setnacht, who restored order after a period of civil conflict but ruled for only a few years before being succeeded by his son Ramesses III. This transition marked the beginning of the last great period of pharaonic imperial authority and cultural achievement. Ramesses III, who ruled for approximately 31 years, faced some of the most serious external threats in Egyptian history while maintaining internal stability and cultural prosperity. His reign witnessed major military campaigns against the Sea Peoples, Libyan invaders, and various Near Eastern enemies that tested Egyptian military capabilities to their limits. The invasions of the Sea Peoples during Ramesses III's reign represented a civilizational crisis that affected the entire Eastern Mediterranean world and contributed to the collapse of several major powers including the Hittite Empire. The pharaoh's successful defense of Egypt against these mysterious invaders was one of the greatest military achievements in ancient history and preserved Egyptian independence during a period when many other civilizations were destroyed. The domestic achievements of Ramesses III's reign included major construction projects, administrative reforms, and cultural developments that maintained the high standards of New Kingdom civilization despite the external pressures that the kingdom faced. His mortuary temple at Medinet Habu, with its detailed reliefs depicting military victories and religious ceremonies, provides invaluable insights into both the practical and spiritual aspects of late New Kingdom pharaonic rule. The later pharaohs of the 20th dynasty, all bearing the name Ramesses, presided over the gradual decline of imperial authority and the fragmentation of centralized control that would eventually lead to the Third Intermediate Period. Their reigns, while maintaining the forms and ceremonies of traditional pharaonic rule, witnessed the emergence of autonomous power centers and the reduction of effective royal authority to the immediate vicinity of the capital. The economic difficulties that characterized the later 20th dynasty reflected both the enormous costs of maintaining imperial defenses and the disruption of trade networks that had supported New Kingdom prosperity. The strikes and civil unrest that occurred during this period revealed the social tensions that economic decline and military pressure had created within Egyptian society. The religious developments of the later New Kingdom period included the increasing power of the Ammonius priesthood at Thebes and the emergence of priestly dynasties that challenged royal authority in both religious and political spheres. The high priests of Ammonius became virtually independent rulers of Upper Egypt, while the pharaohs maintained direct control only over Lower Egypt and the immediate vicinity of their capitals. The international situation during the later New Kingdom period witnessed the final collapse of Egyptian imperial authority in Asia and the reduction of pharaonic influence to Egypt itself and parts of Nubia. The rise of Assyrian power, the emergence of new kingdoms in Palestine and Syria, and the continuing pressure from Libyan tribes and sea peoples created challenges that the weakened pharaonic state could no longer effectively address. Ramesses XI, the last pharaoh of the New Kingdom, ruled for approximately 27 years over a kingdom that was increasingly divided and weakened. His reign witnessed the effective independence of the Theban priesthood under Herihor and the emergence of Smendes as de facto ruler of Lower Egypt, preparing the foundation for the division that would characterize the Third Intermediate Period. The end of the New Kingdom around 1070 BCE marked the close of the last period of unified pharaonic authority over a strong and prosperous Egypt. The 1,000 years that followed would witness repeated attempts to restore the glory of earlier periods, but Egypt would never again achieve the level of international power and cultural influence that had characterized the New Kingdom at its height. The Third Intermediate Period, extending from approximately 1070 to 664 BCE, was characterized by political fragmentation, foreign rule, and cultural decline, yet it also witnessed remarkable examples of pharaonic resilience and the preservation of essential elements of Egyptian civilization despite adverse circumstances. This long era of division and foreign domination tested the adaptability of pharaonic institutions while demonstrating their fundamental durability. The religious innovations of Senusret III's reign included the promotion of new theological concepts that enhanced the pharaoh's divine authority while acknowledging the important roles played by other deities in maintaining cosmic order. The growing prominence of Ammonius during this period reflected the continuing influence of Theban religious traditions while also demonstrating the Middle Kingdom pharaoh's skill in integrating regional beliefs into a unified national religious system. Amenemhat III, who enjoyed one of the longest and most prosperous reigns in Egyptian history, brought Middle Kingdom civilization to its highest point of achievement in virtually every area of human activity. His reign of approximately 45 years saw the completion of monumental building projects, the expansion of trade and diplomatic relations to encompass much of the known world, and the flowering of literary and artistic traditions that would influence Egyptian culture for centuries to come. The pyramid complex of Amenemhat III at Dahshur and his second pyramid at Hawara demonstrated the Middle Kingdom pharaoh's continued commitment to traditional forms of royal burial while incorporating innovations that reflected contemporary religious beliefs and practical considerations. The famous labyrinth associated with the Hawara pyramid was described by ancient visitors as one of the wonders of the world, though little of this remarkable structure survives today. The agricultural and engineering projects undertaken during Amenemhat III's reign transformed the Egyptian economy and created prosperity that benefited all levels of society. The completion of major irrigation works in the Fayum region created an agricultural paradise that became known as the Garden of Egypt, while similar projects throughout the kingdom increased crop yields and supported population growth. The international prestige that Egypt achieved during Amenemhat III's reign is reflected in the diplomatic correspondence and trade records that have survived from this period. Egyptian products were sought after throughout the ancient Near East, while foreign rulers sought Egyptian military assistance and political alliance. The pharaoh's court became a center of international diplomacy where representatives from many different cultures and civilizations met to conduct business and exchange ideas. Amenemhat IV and Queen Sobenfru, the last rulers of the 12th dynasty, inherited a kingdom at the height of its prosperity and cultural achievement but faced challenges that would ultimately lead to the gradual decline of Middle Kingdom power. Their reigns, though successful in many respects, witnessed the beginning of processes that would eventually fragment royal authority and bring about the Second Intermediate Period. The succession difficulties that may have affected the transition from Amenemhat III to his successors reflected broader changes in Egyptian society and politics that were undermining the traditional basis of pharaonic authority. The growth of powerful noble families, the increasing independence of provincial governors, and the complex international situation all contributed to pressures that challenged the unified control that had characterized the Middle Kingdom at its height. Sobenferu, who ruled as pharaoh in her own right for approximately 4 years, demonstrated both the flexibility of pharaonic ideology and the desperate circumstances that led to her unprecedented elevation to the throne. Her reign, though brief, maintained the essential functions of royal government and preserved the continuity of pharaonic tradition during a period of dynastic crisis. The Second Intermediate Period, extending from approximately 1650 to 1550 BCE, marked another time of division and foreign influence when Egypt's unity was challenged by internal conflict and external invasion. This period, while politically chaotic, witnessed important cultural and technological developments that would contribute to the eventual restoration of pharaonic power under the New Kingdom dynasties. The 13th dynasty, which claimed succession from the 12th dynasty pharaohs, maintained control over much of Egypt during the early part of the Second Intermediate Period but faced increasing challenges from rival dynasties and foreign peoples who established their own kingdoms within Egyptian territory. The pharaohs of this dynasty, though they maintained traditional titles and ceremonies, ruled over territories that were progressively reduced in size and influence. The Hyksos, foreign rulers who established the 15th dynasty in the Nile Delta, represented the most serious challenge to pharaonic authority since the unification of Egypt over a millennium earlier. These rulers, whose name means rulers of foreign lands, brought new military technologies and cultural traditions that would significantly influence Egyptian civilization even after their eventual expulsion. The Hyksos pharaohs adopted Egyptian royal titles and religious practices while maintaining their own cultural traditions and military organization. Their capital at Avaris became a cosmopolitan center where Egyptian, Canaanite, and other Near Eastern cultures blended to create new artistic and technological traditions that would enrich Egyptian civilization for centuries to come. The 16th and 17th dynasties, based in Thebes, maintained pharaonic traditions in Upper Egypt while gradually building the military and political strength that would eventually enable them to expel the Hyksos and reunify the kingdom. The pharaohs of these dynasties, particularly those of the 17th dynasty, demonstrated remarkable persistence and strategic vision as they prepared for the campaigns that would restore Egyptian independence and establish the new kingdom. Intef VII and his successors maintained the traditional forms of pharaonic rule despite controlling only a portion of Egypt's territory. Their tombs at Thebes, though modest compared to the monuments of earlier periods, preserved essential elements of royal burial practices and religious beliefs that would be elaborated and renewed during the coming period of national restoration. The military innovations adopted by the Theban pharaohs during their struggle against the Hyksos included new weapons, tactics, and organizational methods that had been learned from their enemies. The horse-drawn chariot, composite bow, and bronze weapons that the Hyksos had introduced to Egypt were mastered by Egyptian warriors who would use these tools to expel the foreign rulers and establish Egyptian dominance throughout the Near East. Kamose, the last pharaoh of the 17th dynasty, began the final campaign against the Hyksos with attacks on their territories in Middle Egypt. His military successes, recorded in contemporary inscriptions, demonstrate both his tactical skill and the growing strength of the Theban forces. Though he died before completing the conquest, Kamose's achievements prepared the way for his successor's final victory. Ahmose I, who founded the 18th dynasty around 1550 BCE, completed the expulsion of the Hyksos and reunified Egypt under pharaonic rule, establishing the new kingdom as one of the most powerful and successful periods in Egyptian history. His reign marked not only the restoration of Egyptian independence but also the beginning of an era of imperial expansion that would make Egypt the dominant power in the ancient Near East for over 4 centuries. The siege and capture of Avaris, the Hyksos capital, represented both a military triumph and a symbolic restoration of pharaonic authority over all Egyptian territory. The systematic destruction of Hyksos fortifications and the deportation of foreign populations demonstrated Ahmose's determination to eliminate all traces of foreign rule while establishing the foundation for renewed Egyptian expansion. The administrative and military reforms implemented by Ahmose I created the governmental and organizational structures that would support New Kingdom imperialism for centuries to come. The professional army that he established, with its emphasis on chariot warfare and disciplined infantry formations, became the instrument through which subsequent pharaohs would extend Egyptian authority throughout the Near East and deep into Africa. The religious significance of Ahmose's victory was emphasized through elaborate temple constructions and ceremonial celebrations that portrayed the pharaoh as the divine champion who had restored Ma'at to Egypt and driven out the forces of chaos and disorder. The theological interpretation of these events established precedents for understanding pharaonic authority that would influence Egyptian religion throughout the New Kingdom period. Amenhotep I, who succeeded his father Ahmose, consolidated the achievements of reunification while beginning the expansion of Egyptian influence that would characterize the New Kingdom period. His reign saw the restoration of trade networks, the resumption of monumental construction projects, and the development of artistic traditions that would reach unprecedented heights during subsequent reigns. The military campaigns of Amenhotep I extended Egyptian control into Nubia and established the foundation for the systematic exploitation of African resources that would fund New Kingdom imperial expansion. The wealth extracted from Nubian gold mines, combined with tribute from conquered territories and profits from expanded trade, created unprecedented prosperity that supported ambitious cultural and architectural projects throughout Egypt. The religious innovations of Amenhotep I's reign included the establishment of new theological concepts that would shape pharaonic ideology throughout the New Kingdom period. The identification of the pharaoh with various aspects of the sun god Ra was elaborated into complex mythological systems that portrayed royal authority as essential for maintaining cosmic order and ensuring the continued existence of the universe itself. Thutmose I ascended to the throne through marriage to Ahmose, a royal princess whose lineage connected him to the legitimate pharaonic bloodline. His reign marked the beginning of truly imperial expansion as Egyptian armies advanced deep into Syria and Palestine, establishing Egyptian authority over territories that had never before acknowledged pharaonic rule. The military achievements of Thutmose I were unprecedented in their scope and ambition. His armies marched to the Euphrates River, the traditional boundary between Egyptian and Mesopotamian spheres of influence, and erected monuments proclaiming pharaonic authority in lands where no Egyptian pharaoh had ever set foot. These conquests brought vast wealth to Egypt while establishing the kingdom as a major power in international politics. The architectural projects undertaken during Thutmose I's reign demonstrated the wealth and confidence that imperial success had brought to Egypt. His additions to the temple complex at Karnak established precedents for the monumental construction projects that would make this site one of the largest religious complexes in the ancient world, while his tomb in the Valley of the Kings initiated royal burial practices that would continue for centuries. The succession of Thutmose II, who married his half-sister Hatshepsut to legitimize his claim to the throne, continued the imperial policies of his predecessor while facing internal challenges that would ultimately lead to one of the most remarkable episodes in pharaonic history. Thutmose II's brief reign maintained Egyptian authority over conquered territories while preparing for the even more ambitious expansion that would characterize later reigns. When Thutmose II died after ruling for only a few years, he left behind a young son, the future Thutmose III, who was too young to rule independently. In the normal course of events, a regent would have governed in the child's name until he reached maturity. However, the queen, Hatshepsut, took the unprecedented step of declaring herself pharaoh, ruling as king rather than queen regent and establishing one of the most successful reigns in Egyptian history. Hatshepsut, whose name means foremost of noble women, justified her assumption of pharaonic authority through elaborate theological arguments that portrayed her divine birth and selection by the gods for royal rule. Her reign, lasting approximately 22 years, demonstrated that pharaonic authority was not inherently masculine and that effective leadership could transcend traditional gender roles when circumstances required exceptional solutions. The peaceful nature of Hatshepsut's reign provided a welcome respite from the military campaigns that had characterized the early New Kingdom period, while allowing Egypt to consolidate its gains and develop the internal resources that would support future expansion. Her emphasis on trade expeditions rather than military conquests brought wealth and exotic goods to Egypt while establishing peaceful relations with distant peoples. The famous expedition to Punt during Hatshepsut's reign, depicted in detailed reliefs at her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, demonstrated the pharaoh's ability to achieve through diplomacy and trade what others might attempt through military force. The exotic animals, plants, and goods brought back from Punt enriched Egyptian culture while establishing precedents for peaceful international exchange that would benefit the kingdom for generations. The architectural achievements of Hatshepsut's reign, particularly her magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari, represent some of the finest examples of Egyptian architecture and demonstrate the Queen Pharaoh's sophisticated understanding of architectural symbolism and religious meaning. The temple's integration into the natural landscape and its innovative design features influenced Egyptian architecture for centuries while serving as a permanent monument to her successful reign. The artistic innovations of Hatshepsut's reign included the development of new iconographic conventions for representing female pharaohs and the elaboration of royal religious imagery that emphasized the pharaoh's role as divine daughter and earthly representative of the gods. These artistic achievements demonstrated the flexibility of Egyptian artistic traditions and their ability to adapt to unprecedented political circumstances. When Thutmose III finally assumed sole authority after Hatshepsut's death, he inherited a kingdom that was prosperous, stable, and well-positioned for the imperial expansion that would make his reign one of the most celebrated in Egyptian history. His early campaigns restored Egyptian authority over territories that had become restive during the peaceful years of Hatshepsut's reign while establishing the foundation for conquests that would extend Egyptian influence throughout the Near East. The Battle of Megiddo, fought early in Thutmose III's independent reign, demonstrated his tactical genius and established his reputation as one of history's greatest military commanders. His victory over a coalition of Syrian and Palestinian cities not only restored Egyptian authority in these regions but also established the strategic principles that would guide Egyptian imperial policy for the remainder of the New Kingdom period. The 17 military campaigns that Thutmose III conducted during his reign extended Egyptian authority from the Fourth Cataract of the Nile in the south to the Euphrates River in the north, creating an empire that encompassed territories from Sudan to Syria and established Egypt as the dominant power in the ancient Near East. The wealth that flowed into Egypt from tribute, trade, and plunder funded ambitious construction projects and supported a level of cultural achievement that has rarely been equaled in human history. The administrative system that Thutmose III developed to govern his vast empire represented a masterpiece of ancient statecraft that combined direct control over strategic areas with indirect rule through local princes and governors who acknowledged Egyptian authority. This system proved remarkably effective in maintaining imperial unity while allowing for local autonomy in matters that did not affect Egyptian interests. The temple construction projects undertaken during Thutmose III's reign transformed the religious landscape of Egypt and demonstrated the pharaoh's understanding of the connection between military success and divine favor. The massive additions to the temple complex at Karnak not only provided appropriate settings for religious ceremonies but also served as permanent monuments to pharaonic achievements that would inspire future generations. Amenhotep II, who succeeded his father Thutmose III, inherited an empire at the height of its power and prosperity but faced the challenge of maintaining imperial authority without the personal charisma and military genius that had characterized his predecessor. His reign demonstrated both the strengths and the limitations of the imperial system that the early New Kingdom pharaohs had created. The military campaigns of Amenhotep II, while less extensive than those of his father, maintained Egyptian authority over conquered territories and demonstrated the continuing effectiveness of Egyptian military organization and tactics. His emphasis on physical prowess and athletic achievement, celebrated in numerous inscriptions and reliefs, reflected both personal interests and the importance of maintaining pharaonic prestige through demonstrations of superior capability. The diplomatic activities of Amenhotep II's reign revealed the complex international situation that Egyptian imperial success had created. The need to maintain alliances with friendly rulers while deterring potential enemies required sophisticated understanding of Near Eastern politics and careful balancing of competing interests and obligations. Thutmose IV, whose reign was marked by both military achievements and religious innovations, faced the ongoing challenge of maintaining imperial authority while adapting to changing international circumstances. His famous dream stela, which describes his divine selection for the throne through a prophetic dream received while sleeping beside the Great Sphinx, demonstrates the continuing importance of religious legitimation for pharaonic authority. The marriage alliance that Thutmose IV concluded with the Mitannian kingdom represented a significant shift in Egyptian foreign policy from conquest and domination toward diplomatic accommodation with powerful neighbors. This alliance, sealed by the pharaoh's marriage to a Mitannian princess, established precedents for international diplomacy that would influence Egyptian foreign policy for centuries. The religious reforms associated with Thutmose IV's reign included increased emphasis on solar theology and the promotion of religious concepts that would reach their full development during the reign of his son Amenhotep III. The growing importance of the sun god Are-Horikti and the development of complex theological systems linking pharaonic authority to solar divinity prepared the foundation for even more radical religious developments in the following generation. The pharaohs faced the same fundamental challenges that confront all human societies: how to organize large numbers of people for productive cooperation, how to maintain justice and security, how to create meaning and purpose in human life, and how to achieve lasting accomplishments that will benefit future generations. Their solutions to these challenges were both specific to their own circumstances and broadly relevant to human civilization in general. The religious vision that guided pharaonic civilization, with its emphasis on cosmic order, moral responsibility, and the continuity of life beyond death, provided a framework for understanding human existence that gave meaning and purpose to individual lives while supporting social cooperation and cultural achievement. This vision, expressed through magnificent art and architecture, created a cultural legacy that continues to enrich human experience thousands of years after the last pharaoh ruled. The political system that the pharaohs developed, based on the concept of divine kingship balanced by moral responsibility and practical effectiveness, demonstrated that stable, prosperous government could be maintained over very long periods when it successfully integrated spiritual authority with administrative competence. The pharaohs showed that effective leadership requires not only power but also wisdom, not only authority but also service to the common good. The artistic achievements of pharaonic civilization, from the earliest royal monuments to the magnificent temples of the Ptolemaic period, established aesthetic principles and technical standards that continue to influence art and architecture throughout the world. The pharaohs understood that beauty and meaning are essential human needs that must be satisfied if civilizations are to flourish and endure. The scientific and technological accomplishments of pharaonic Egypt, including their architectural engineering, astronomical observations, mathematical calculations, and medical knowledge, demonstrated that human intelligence could comprehend natural laws and apply them for practical benefit. The pharaohs sponsored and supported intellectual achievement that advanced human understanding and capability in ways that benefited not only their own civilization but all subsequent human development. The social and economic systems that supported pharaonic civilization showed that large, complex societies could be organized to provide security, prosperity, and opportunity for their members while maintaining the cultural and spiritual values that give life meaning and purpose. The pharaohs created a society that was both stable and dynamic, both traditional and innovative, both unified and diverse. As the golden light of our imaginative journey through pharaonic Egypt begins to fade like the gentle glow of sunset over the Nile, we can feel a deep sense of satisfaction and wonder at the magnificent story we have shared together. The pharaohs, those god-kings who ruled from the dawn of civilization to the threshold of the modern world, have shown us what human beings can accomplish when they combine vision with determination, wisdom with power, and spiritual insight with practical skill. Their monuments still stand in the desert, touched by the same sunlight that illuminated their builders' work thousands of years ago. Their words still speak to us from hieroglyphic inscriptions that preserve their thoughts, hopes, and achievements for all who care to listen. Their legacy lives on in the countless ways that pharaonic civilization influenced the development of human culture, from art and architecture to religion and government, from science and technology to literature and philosophy. The story of the pharaohs is ultimately the story of human potential realized through sustained effort over many generations. It reminds us that civilizations are built not by single individuals, however great, but by communities of people working together toward common goals and shared values. It shows us that lasting achievement requires not only brilliance and ambition but also patience, persistence, and the wisdom to build upon the foundations that previous generations have laid. In the gentle darkness that now surrounds us, like the peaceful embrace of the ancient Egyptian night sky with its eternal stars, we can carry with us the inspiration that the pharaohs provide, the knowledge that human beings are capable of creating beauty, meaning, and lasting value that can endure across the centuries and enrich the lives of countless future generations. The pharaohs sleep now in their eternal rest, but their spirit lives on in every human heart that aspires to excellence, in every mind that seeks to understand the mysteries of existence, and in every soul that believes in the possibility of creating something beautiful and enduring that will outlast our brief time on earth. Their greatest monument is not built of stone but of inspiration, the continuing human dream of achieving greatness through wisdom, courage, and dedication to the highest values we can imagine. Sleep well, and let the gentle breeze of the Nile carry your dreams back through time to walk with the pharaohs in their eternal kingdom, where the sun never sets on human achievement and where the best aspirations of the human heart shine forever like stars in the infinite sky of eternity.